Chapter 4000. So bright. It was as if that beam of sunlight had passed through that tiny ring and directly shot into his heart. The pressing warmth seemed to be able to instantly disperse much of the haze and poisonous miasma. Lonely Mountain was cold all around, but he couldn't feel much coldness right now. Duan Yu gripped that ring with an indifferent expression. Physician too eagerly gazed at Duan Yu from afar with a curious and frenzied expression. Master, give me a definite answer. Duan Yu put away the ring and the small white letter into his sleeve before handing the antidote letter to Ing. Ing returned the letter to Physician Tuesday. Physician Tu quickly skimmed through the letter. After he finished reading, his eyes lit up as he looked at Duan Yu. He couldn't help but sigh. Amazing. You really could tell. Soul-devouring flowers couldn't be considered a poison at all. Some female cultivators even specially used them to concoct perfume. This was because the perfume concocted from the soul-devouring flower was very refreshing and pleasant. Furthermore, it had no side effects on cultivators' bodies. However, just as the letter said, the other party very shrewdly found such a common, yet very useful item and specially used it to deal with Her Highness Noble Consort Duan, who was a normal person. It didn't matter how rare or precious the item was. It only mattered that it was useful to a mortal woman. If it weren't for the fact that the pill refiner had a profound understanding of pharmacology and was very proficient in all kinds of medicinal herbs in the world, who would associate it with such a common soul-devouring flower in such a short time? Physician Tu carefully folded the letter and put it into an envelope before respectfully presenting it with both hands. Duan Yu also put the letter into his sleeve before looking at the silent woman standing on the side. Is there anything else? Physician Tu said with a conflicted expression. Master, this subordinate wants to go to the Divine Province's Heavenly Pill Hall to study for a month. In order to stay by Master's side in the future and be able to take better care of him, Tu Xiuxiu felt that her decision was definitely correct. Otherwise, with her current half-baked ability, she might not be able to take care of Master if someone else extended a vicious hand to him. An extremely faint smile appeared on Duan Yu's lips. Go if you want. I'll write a letter for you to bring over. Yes. Tu Xiuxiu nodded solemnly. She cupped her fists and bowed. Thank you for your tolerance, Master. Lil Kuzi and Aunt Yuan Jun ran over in small, quick steps. After bowing, Xiao Kuzi panted as he said, Your Highness, the Emperor is urgently summoning you back. A cold and sharp glint flashed through Duan Yu's eyes. He didn't say anything and just nodded his head. Seeing little Kuzi staring at him blankly, he could not help but say helplessly, Go and pack your luggage. We're going down the mountain this afternoon. Xiao Kuzi instantly cried tears of joy. He looked at Duan Yu and stammered. Your Highness, is this true? You really must be willing to go down the mountain. All right, this servant will go and prepare. He couldn't be blamed for being stupid, but His Highness was too stubborn. During this period of time, it was unknown how many people had tried to persuade His Highness to leave the mountain. Even Left Prime Minister Wu Yong had come to see him once a night. However, he was still unable to persuade His Highness to change his mind. A storm was brewing in the royal court. Due to His Majesty's illness, the second prince and third prince were in a state of chaos. On the other hand, that crown prince appeared to be very calm and never fought with anyone. He hid in the Eastern Palace every day to walk the birds and play with the dogs, living a more carefree life than anyone else. Chapter 4001. She really couldn't figure out what was going on. She kept feeling that His Highness the Crown Prince, Rong Li, seemed to have suddenly changed his personality. He didn't even fight with the second prince and third prince recently. It seemed like he was cultivating his character. Wasn't this a joke? Your Highness. A black figure flitted across the sky and landed beside Ing. Ing immediately bowed respectfully in greeting. This was the captain of their hidden guards, Yi. He was the leader of the entire hidden guards, and he was also the one who usually dispatched all the hidden guards outside. Now that he suddenly appeared here, he must have something urgent to report to His Highness. Ing retreated a few more steps and sent a look to Yuan Jun and Xiao Kezi, telling them to retreat as well. The leader of the hidden guards, Yi, took 2 steps forward and whispered to Duan Yu. Her Majesty the Empress sent a group of hidden guards to investigate the movements of the people around you. We have also been targeted. Duan Yu's lips turned up in a sneer. Then let them investigate. In any case, none of the people around him had moved recently, so what clues could they find? The ones who made the move were all the men that Prince Mo arranged in secret. But speaking of which, this punk, he actually left so many hidden guards in Phoenix Emperor City. He was truly wicked, immoral. These hidden guards were originally left in case of an emergency. They were most likely used to deal with his emperor father, Rong Yuan. To think that Prince Mo actually had such great patience. Who knew how many years he had been plotting? So the number of men he left in Phoenix Emperor City was really quite a lot. Duan Yu couldn't help but shake his head at this thought. Whoever made an enemy out of Mo Lien would truly have 8 lifetimes of bad luck, because this guy was too black-hearted and too scary. If you accidentally offended him, who knew how many traps he would set around you, just waiting for you to foolishly walk right into his trap. It was indeed time to meet that old woman. Duan Yu's lips curled up in a cold smile. That afternoon, all the aristocratic families and officials in Song Prefecture's Phoenix Emperor City received the news His Highness Prince Chun had returned to the palace. Mai Chao's section break. When Mo Lien pushed open the door and entered, she saw her wife drooping on the bed with her eyes half closed. Who knew what she was thinking about? From the looks of it, it was as if he had fallen asleep in the middle of his cultivation and was hanging by the side of the bed. Was that what he was thinking? Although his little wife's cultivation was impermanent, she probably wouldn't do such a strange thing, right? His footsteps were light, but he suddenly stopped and looked at the little guy with a strange expression. At this moment, he was absolutely certain that his wife had fallen asleep. He could even hear the sound of her even breathing. This wasn't even a light sleep. He was half hanging by the side of the bed. In a strange position, he was sound asleep. Wife, you're really capable. She had never seen a cultivator fall asleep while cultivating. The corners of Mo Lien's mouth twitched. He quickened his steps and floated to his baby's side. He half squatted in front of her and looked at her, sleeping expressionlessly with her head lowered. Pooh! Mo Lien turned his head and glared at the guy who laughed at his wife. Zhiqin blinked and poured himself a cup of cold tea. As he drank, he shook his head and said, "This is this noble one's first time seeing someone fall asleep while cultivating in seclusion. What do you know?" Mo Lien reflexively retorted, "Look at my Jojo, even though he's asleep." Chapter 4002. But the divine power surrounding her is still absorbing the divine power of heaven and earth. Don't you see the divine power surrounding her? It was only at this point that Mo Lien suddenly realized what he had said, and he immediately lowered his head to size up his wife again. Ma Shiqin also stopped laughing and carefully looked at his Joe from head to toe. Then he exclaimed, "Hey, you're right. She really is. Holy shit." Judging from the level of divine power in his body, Charles' cultivation speed in his sleep was actually not much slower than his normal cultivation speed. In fact, it could even be said that it was even faster than his normal cultivation speed. Hu Shiqin did not even notice when the teacup in his hand rolled onto the table and the tea spilled all over the table. He only looked at his Jojo carefully, as if he was looking at a god. His mouth opened and closed several times, but he could not say anything normal. She was too freaking weird, okay? Cultivation required one to use one's own divine consciousness to communicate with the divine power of heaven and earth and absorb it. Who else could continue to absorb divine power as if their body was breathing freely after they fell asleep? I've never seen Jojo being so amazing before. Mo Lien explained expressionlessly. I'm afraid it's a new skill that was unlocked after she advanced to the godly state. Hu Shiqin looked at him silently, and suddenly felt that Mo Lien's words made a lot of sense. For a moment, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal did not know how to answer or refute. He just stood there in a daze. Xiao Mu yawned and opened her confused eyes. She raised her small head slightly, and when she saw the Crown Prince's strange expression, she reflexively flicked her eyebrows. Why did you come back so early today?" She suddenly realized that she was hanging by the bed and her little face stiffened. Then, She immediately straightened her posture and continued to sit cross-legged. Only then did she realize that besides Yin, the venerable peach blossom immortal was also sitting at the table and looking at her with a confused expression. Both of their expressions were a little weird. The little fellow muttered in her heart. She put on a serious face and said to the venerable peach blossom immortal who was looking at her, "What are you doing? Don't disturb my cultivation." If the venerable peach blossom immortal had tea in his mouth, he would have choked on it. Fortunately, he had the foresight and could not help but laugh strangely. "Jojo, your cultivation method is quite unique." Yin pursed her lips and poked her little head with her finger. She coughed softly and said, "Baby, you fell asleep just now." Sir Jojo glanced at him and quickly denied it. Impossible. What kind of joke was this? How could she, Master Jojo, fall asleep while cultivating? If word got out, wouldn't it make people laugh their heads off? Yin and Ma Shurchin looked at each other and exchanged a helpless look at the same time. See, this is the little fellow's usual style die beat. A duck die won't admit to... Yin raised her hand and patted her on the head. "Jojo, we just realized that you can automatically draw in the god power of heaven and earth after you fall asleep and absorb it endlessly into your body." Sir Jojo looked up at her husband. "Speak human language. You're still cultivating after you fall asleep." Looking at the two men who spoke in unison, Arbor laughed at them expressionlessly. Then he jumped off the bed and walked out. "I'm cultivating." He did not sleep. Chapter 4003. Outside the door, they could still hear the two people's unbridled and bold laughter. Sir Jojo turned to glare at the door, then snorted and turned to walk towards the small kitchen. Since he had nothing to do, Sir Jojo cooked a sumptuous lunch for them. When the head chefs and junior royal maids who were busy in the small kitchen saw that the young crown prince consort had come over from afar, their faces immediately showed very interesting expressions. Why is the crown princess coming towards the small kitchen? The crown princess couldn't be thinking of personally cooking something for the crown prince again, right? Don't dear the last time you personally cooked a bowl of black soup. They couldn't bear to look at it, but His Highness actually really drank it. The moment the little crown princess walked into the small kitchen, she immediately found that the surrounding sounds had disappeared. Even the sound of the chefs chopping vegetables had disappeared. She expressionlessly dug around in her inner world and took out a lot of ingredients: clear stream spirit bamboo shoots, colorful divine fish, and various kinds of poultry that have been bred in Paradise Planet for a long time. In a moment, the entire quiet kitchen was completely filled with the sound of chickens flying and ducks jumping. When Kai Shio received the news, she hastily rushed over and put on a colorful smile. She couldn't help but console her in a soft voice. "Crown Prince Consort, let's leave the ingredients here and let head chef Wong and the others cook." Yes. Crown Princess can just tell us what she wants to eat. No matter if it's steamed, boiled, fried, or fried, anything is fine. Everyone in the small kitchen nodded in unison. "I beg you, little Crown Princess, don't waste our poor Crown Prince anymore." Looking at His Highness' pitiful appearance, they all felt their hearts ache. Xiao Mu expressionlessly glanced at them. As she followed Saishio outside, she asked coldly, "Do they dislike me?" "No, absolutely not." Kai Shio's little face was about to stiffen from smiling. Turning her head, she sincerely blinked at the crown princess. "They're all afraid that the crown princess is too tired." "Humph! Don't think that this crown princess is stupid and can't see the fear in their eyes." The crown princess was not an assassin, so why were they so afraid of her? "I heard that virtuous women have to wash their hands and cook for their husbands." The corner of Kai Shio's mouth twitched. She quickly smiled and said, "Crown Princess, you are already virtuous enough. Besides, didn't we already make soup last time?" Everyone in the small kitchen didn't want to recall the process of making soup. What a pity for their peerless and elegant crown prince. In the face of the bowl of special soup that his wife had brought over, he was actually able to drink it without any change in expression or heart rate, as expected of the crown prince, who would remain calm even if MT Tai collapsed in front of him. They were the strongest warriors of the divine land. He was their future king at that time. The jaws of all the eunuchs and palace maids inside and outside the small kitchen had probably dropped to the ground when head chef Wang and the rest saw the little crown princess in the future. They would all have a trace of psychological trauma. Arbor touched his fingers embarrassedly. Isn't that a failure? She wasn't a fool. How could she not know that that black bowl of soup was a failure? How could there be a Lingji nourishing soup that turned into a black sesame seed? It must be that the recipe was wrong. She wasn't a chef in the past. Without training, how could she make a good soup? Chapter 4004. The corners of Kai Shio's mouth twitched. With great difficulty and a strange expression, she tried her best to dispel her little master's strange idea. Crown Prince Consort. The Lingji mushroom soup we made last time was definitely very effective. Although it doesn't look good on the surface, it's actually very effective. That bowl of Lingji soup made His Royal Highness so hungry that he didn't want to eat for 3 days. She felt that His Royal Highness was incomparably unlucky. His Royal Highness can't eat such good soup often. Didn't you hear the old saying? It's too weak to make up for it. Crown Prince is weak? Arbor looked stunned. No, it's too weak to make up for it, right? Kai Shio tried her best to make up for the meaning in her words. Seeing the little crown princess frowning, she suddenly forced herself to change the topic. By the way, I heard that the city is very lively tonight. It said that the biggest spring house in the city is going to hold a spring party tonight. Kai Shio couldn't help but cry silently after she finished speaking. Why did he have to rub his nose in it? His Royal Highness seemed to have warned them before that they were not allowed to mention the word spring house in front of the little crown princess. Sure enough, when the little crown princess heard this, her eyes couldn't help but light up slightly. That idiot Mudoni also mentioned it yesterday. Kai Shio silently shed tears and forced a smile. Actually, there's nothing to see. It's just a few gorgeously dressed men dancing and singing songs or something like that. The little palace maids passing by were speechless. Sister Kai Shio's words aroused the little crown princess' curiosity. Okay? By the way, crown princess, aren't you going to cultivate? I won't delay you. This servant will send you back to your room. Arbor nodded expressionlessly and suddenly asked, Did you come to my room in the afternoon? I did. What was I doing? You were cultivating. Kai Shio's mouth twitched and suddenly said loudly, You were very serious. Arbor nodded and continued to walk forward expressionlessly with a pair of small hands behind her back. That's right. How could she cultivate until she fell asleep? She had always been cultivating seriously. Not long after dinner, the crown prince was urgently summoned to the study by the emperor. The little crown princess had nothing to do, so she sat on a small table and flipped through a book. Suddenly, she tossed the book aside and rolled her eyes. She ran to the cupboard at the side of the bedroom and rummaged through it to find a set of royal blue clothes. She put it on and tried it on. It fit her small body perfectly. This should be Mo Yin's clothes from when she was young. She tucked the sleeves inside, and it would fit her just right. After changing her clothes, the little fellow tied her hair into a ponytail and found a small jade crown to fix her hair. Then he slipped out of the Eastern Palace like a wisp of smoke. Before doing all this, the little guy still had a guilty conscience and secretly blocked the star field, however. As soon as she moved, the shadows of several hidden guards followed her. After Sir Jojo left the Eastern Palace, he summoned the heavenly horsetail feather and jumped on it to stroll out of the palace. Mo Yin was still in the emperor's study, discussing the zombie outbreak in the outskirts of Li City with him. Suddenly, he received a distress message from A.O. Yi. Save me, your highness. The crown princess ran away. That bastard fool. Mo Yin's mouth twitched. He elegantly closed the file with one hand and waved at his imperial father. My wife asked me to go back. We'll talk again tomorrow morning. Chapter 4005. Ignoring Mo Yoshing's furious glare at her back, Mo Yin left the imperial study and summoned A.O. Yi. Where did the crown princess go? A.O. Yi glanced at him pitifully and hastily said, Grand Crown Princess, she should have gone to Spring House to participate in the Spring Festival. Mo Yin. I already told you not to mention this damn spring festival in front of your wife. His wife was young and couldn't be tempted. She was born with a strong sense of curiosity and couldn't help but join in the fun whenever she encountered something fun. What was he supposed to do? Your Highness, should we mobilize the Emperor's shadow guards to capture the crown princess? Aoi immediately asked. Prince Mo leisurely glanced at him and coolly asked, when this crown prince is punished by my wife to kneel, will you take her place? Aoi immediately adjusted his expression and shook his head vigorously. No need, Your Highness. It's better for you to bear the crown princess's love for you alone. Haha, looks like this punk, Mrs. Huifeng. Aoi replied seriously. Your Highness, then what should we do? Prince Mo gave him a chilly smile and grumpily roared. So useless, you can't even stop the crown princess. What else could he do? Of course, he had to leave the palace to find his wife. Aoi glanced at his master pitifully and quietly muttered, who dares to stop the little crown princess? What are you saying? This subordinate didn't say anything. Aoi turned his head and silently shed tears. What could he do when he met an unreasonable master? He could only silently accept his fate. Arbor strolled out of the Eastern Palace alone and vigilantly glanced back. Oomph. Do you think I wouldn't know that a few shadow guards are following this lord sneakily? The little fellow took out a small golden fan and opened it with a snap. He fanned himself twice and then frowned. It was such a hot day, yet he was fanning himself while walking. He really looked like an idiot. There was no wind at all. She really didn't know why there were so many men who liked to fan themselves all day long. For example, eldest young Master Qin. The little girl threw away her fan and ran towards the southern part of the city like a wisp of smoke. Spring Full House was opened in South City. It was said that it had only been operating for less than half a month, but the degree of its business was already catching up to the veteran pink houses. This brothel was probably a little strange. How could a small brothel open from the lower star field to the upper 3 continents? This was simply unheard of. She had to personally investigate this matter and find out what was going on. Aya, young master, quickly come in. Today, our Apricot Blossom Brothel has a special discount. The ladies in the brothel are all gorgeously dressed and beautiful. No matter what style you want, we have it. Before the little crown princess could walk up the steps of the spring-filled house, she was stopped by a madam who was wearing red and green makeup and had pearls all over her head. The little girl couldn't help but take 3 steps back when she saw the madam's yellow-toothed grin. In the blink of an eye, a figure flew down from the front of the spring-filled house and blocked the madam's path. Maruachuan, why did you come to our spring-filled house to solicit business? This little brother is obviously here for our spring-filled house. Bah! Maruachuan glared at the red-clothed man as if she was looking at a coquettish slut. She reached out to grab Arbor. Little brother, don't be blinded by these demons and monsters. They're not good people. Chapter 4006. The price of this spring room isn't cheap, but the service in the room simply can't keep up. That's to deceive you young customers who don't know how to appreciate the market price. Don't fall for it, little brother. The man in red raised his hand and blocked in front of Madame Chun. He chuckled and said, Madame Chun, don't meddle. Be careful. You'll get beaten. As he spoke, the man waved his hand. Immediately, more than a dozen burly men rushed out of the spring-filled house and surrounded Mother Chun, who was swallowing her saliva. You want to force a sale? Madame Chun yelled in exasperation. Afterwards, she was forcibly dragged away from the entrance of the spring room by the dozen or so burly men with fierce-looking faces. The man in red swept her a glance, and just as he was about to tug on the little stoic's sleeve, she brushed him aside and threw him aside in disdain. The man in red glanced at her aggrievedly with a pitiful expression. Little stoic, in any case, we've met twice before. Don't keep people at arm's length. The stoic face expressionlessly lowered her head to look at her small hand and subconsciously touched her small face. Strange, people could still recognize her at a glance, even though she was dressed in men's clothing. It wasn't like Emol Yin and Duan. You were familiar with her, and could recognize her at a glance. Why did this man in red also recognize her at a glance? Red, what are you dawdling outside for? A blue figure floated over, and when his gaze landed on Arbor, his eyes suddenly brightened. The little stoic is here. Arbor, could it be that his face was so recognizable? After rolling his eyes at the two people, Sir Jojo immediately walked toward the entrance of the spring room without a word. 5 of the 7 flowers were currently standing at the entrance and chatting with guests from all over with a grin. When they looked up and saw the little stoic, they couldn't help but size her up. The little girl specially changed into men's clothing today. She probably purposely changed into men's clothing because she was afraid of being recognized. She tied her long ponytail with a jade crown and swayed behind her head. She had an expressionless face and was extremely adorable. The 5 flowers simultaneously waved their hands at Xiao Mu, greeting her with a grin. Upon seeing this, the female guests who were chatting with them at the entrance all turned their heads to look in the little stoic's direction. When a plump middle-aged woman saw the little stoic's exquisite small face, her eyes abruptly lit up, and she asked with a dazed expression, Greenie, is this little brother a newcomer to your brothel? The green-clothed young man whose hand was being held by the woman blinked pitifully and repeatedly tried to withdraw his hand that was being molested by the old woman. Madam, that little brother is a guest. The old woman suddenly understood something. Her face stiffened slightly, and she glanced at Arbor with an ugly expression. She clicked her tongue and shook her head. You're so young, but you're actually a homosexual. She brushed her nose with her handkerchief in disdain, but she still held Green Yee's small hand and dragged him inside the room. Greenie, you must accompany Madam for a few drinks today. Madam, I'm not good at drinking. The green young sir called out pitifully, his pair of watery eyes occasionally sending pleading glances at the little stoic. The little stoic student furrowed her brows again and again. Seeing the old woman's vulgar expression as she held his small hand and refused to let go was truly an eyesore. Didn't she see that he wasn't willing to drink with her? Chapter 4007. Arbor restrained herself, but she felt that there was no need to do so. Then, she dashed forward and landed a vicious eagle hook on the woman's left eye, seeing that plump woman howl, and rolled down the steps. The corners of the 7 flowers' mouths twitched in unison, and they glanced at the stoic face in exasperation. The little fellow looked back and happened to see a carriage parked at the bottom of the steps. A white, slender figure emerged from the carriage and stepped out, almost stepping on the fat woman who had bumped into the carriage wheel. The newcomer hastily retracted her foot and looked up with a dumbfounded expression. Then, she opened the small fan in her hand and almost laughed out loud. Jojo, it's truly a small world. Arbor rolled her eyes and pretended not to see eldest Cheen's face that deserved a spanking. Following eldest young sir out of the carriage were 2 other young sirs who were also dressed in moon-white robes. Arbor swept a glance over them and knew that these 2 were also women dressed as men. She even recognized one of them. It was the Lin family's young miss, Lin Miao. Arbor wasn't familiar with the other woman dressed as a man, but seeing how familiar she was with Lin Miao, she guessed that she was probably a young miss from some aristocratic family. Eldest young sir waved his fan and walked up with a grin. He stretched out his hand in front of Arbor and said, Jojo, are you here to join the fun? Let me introduce you. These 2 are the Lin family's Lin Miao, and that's the Gu family's Gu Yisin. Their carriage broke down halfway, so this young sir gave them a lift. Arbor looked at him expressionlessly, baffled. Why was this guy explaining things to her? Fan Meng and Fan Yu are starting their performance. Hurry, hurry, hurry. After a burst of lively voices, everyone surged into the building. Arbor followed the crowd and entered the door. She immediately saw Mu Dongni, who was squeezed at the edge of the stage and clinging onto it, repeatedly calling out, Meng, 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 Meng. This idiot. A vein on Arbor's forehead throbbed slightly. Don't you dare fight with me for my Meng Meng. Today, even if I, Mu Dongni, have to spend 10 million spirit coins to have a long talk with my Meng Meng. Pooh, Eldest young Sir Chen's irritating voice suddenly sounded in a certain person's ear. Jojo, look at how explosive this scene is. If that jealous lover Imo Lien finds out that you came to this brothel to bid for the male courtesan Belle, tell me, how are you going to live your days? Nonsense. Mr. Jojo glared at him angrily. Which eye of yours saw me bidding? What a joke. The crowd was too crowded, and the little girl grew impatient. She turned around and punched a madam's waist, causing the madam in front to fall forward. Cries of alarm rang out. At the same time, Mr. Jojo turned around and kicked another woman who had squeezed her way forward. In just a few moments, he cleared through all the people around him out. The corners of eldest young Sir Chen's eyes twitched. He couldn't help but secretly applaud the little girl's violence. Taking advantage of the chaos, the little fellow slipped away, shaking off eldest young Sir Chen, who was following her like a shadow, and ran up to the second floor. If there was something strange about this brothel, there would always be some clues left behind in the room. The little girl kicked open the door, and two panic screams of varying lengths immediately rang out from inside. Sorry, this lord kicked the wrong door. You two can continue, huh? The little girl closed the door and turned around, reflexively dodging a sharp grab. Chapter 4008. That person's vicious claw really did have the intention of tearing the little girl apart. However, what kind of person was Arbor? How could she be torn apart by that person's claw? She stretched out her fist and pointed, and a blue spiritual flame shot towards the other party's arm. That person covered his face and retracted his arm. His 5 fingers quickly extinguished the blue spiritual flame, and then he quickly kicked open the door to the side of the room. The two unlucky fellows who had already been kicked in the door before were startled again. Trembling, they knelt on the bed and hugged each other in a twisted posture. With a whoosh, the masked man brushed past their bed and jumped out of the window to escape. His figure quickly disappeared into the twilight. Arbor was baffled. She lowered her head and looked at her little hand. She blinked her eyes and thought. That person was clearly aggressive and wanted to kill her at first, but why did he immediately retreat when she turned around and looked at him? Could it be that this person also recognized her? The little girl had a puzzled expression. She closed the door for the two unlucky people and shook her little paw. Continue your sister. After being interrupted twice in a row. Who could continue? The two people looked at each other in dismay and couldn't help but spit at her. Arbor knocked on the second door and leaned forward to listen. Seeing that there was no movement inside, she pushed open the door and ran in. She rummaged through the chests and cabinets. This room looked very ordinary, just like an ordinary guest room. At a glance, other than a screen and a bed, there was only a simple storage shelf in the corner with a few scattered books and trinkets. Arbor searched for a long time without finding anything, so she sneaked out of the room. She rummaged through the second floor and searched through 4 or 5 rooms in a row. Finally, she reached the innermost part of the corridor and entered an elegantly decorated room. The little girl wiped her sweat and sat down at the table. She secretly scolded the owner of this little brothel for being so crafty. She rummaged through several rooms in a row, but she didn't find anything. This was simply illogical. As far as she was concerned, this strange little and had to be hiding something for her. Now that she thought about it carefully, it was very strange that Yi Lingmin had led her to that building that night on Seacombe Planet. At that time, Yi Lingmin also said that Shuntian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord Gung Pengcheng's underground base was located under the entire red light district. But was that really Gung Pengcheng's underground base? Or was it the power behind him? Ever since she arranged for Dun Zong to stay in Shuntian Prefecture, Tian Yun's people never appeared to contact him again. This meant that Dun Zheng's identity must have been exposed. However, it was clear that the current Tian Yun had placed all his attention on the upper 3 continents. He would definitely not spare any time to deal with the Dun clan in the Shuntian Prefecture. If they didn't have any background, who would have the leisure to open a small brothel in the upper 3 provinces? With such wealth, power, he could have done something else. Why did he have to continue to open a brothel in Shenzhou? Could it be a strange stronghold? Under the jurisdiction of the Heavenly Fate Administration, the more the little girl thought about it, the more suspicious she became. She sized up the room. There was probably a secret passage in this place, right? The little girl stood up and rummaged through the boxes and cabinets to continue searching. She knocked on the floor and the bed, trying to find some secret passage. After rummaging for a long time, she found nothing and tired herself out. A certain little person thumped her little waist and raised her head speechlessly. She propped up her chin in puzzlement and squatted by the table, thinking about something. Chapter 4009. Could it be that Sir Jojo's clever brain was mistaken? However, she had once used her divine perception to secretly investigate the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple at the door. Indeed, there was nothing in their heads, and there wasn't the slightest fluctuation of spiritual energy on their bodies. They should be mortals. It was very strange. Sir Jojo was crouching next to the table when he suddenly heard a sound coming from the door. Without thinking, he immediately stuck an invisibility talisman on himself. Bang! The door to the room abruptly slammed shut. A slightly familiar voice then came from the door, calling sweetly, "Meng Meng, ah? Am I dreaming? Wow, I'm really touching my Meng Meng." Arbor, why was Mu Dongni, this scoundrel, everywhere she went? "Madam, don't be like this. I still have to perform a song on stage later. Meng Meng, you can just have someone else play the song. It's rare for us to meet. So how about you accompany me for a drink or two?" The invisible Sir Jojo was sitting at the small round table made of pear wood in the room, expressionlessly glaring at the woman who was practically hanging half her body on Fan Meng. Madam, pitiful Fan Meng's slender body was about to be crushed by Mu Dongni's sturdy body. What, madam? That damn husband of mine died long ago, and I'm unmarried right now." Mu Dongni covered her mouth and giggled, almost causing the little stoic to have goosebumps all over her body. Fan Meng tried her best to pull away this madam's octopus-like hands, and her elegant face revealed a very troubled and pitiful expression. Madam, don't pull anymore. This fellow was wearing clothes made of extremely moist silk. After Mu Dongni, that dunce, tugged at it twice with all her might, half of her glistening and glossy skin was revealed. It really looked seductive. Mu Dongni hung on Fan Meng's body the entire way here, as if she couldn't walk. This scene was simply unbearable to look at. Arbor sat there expressionlessly as he watched them walk over and squeeze to sit next to him. Mu Dongni rubbed herself against the man with an intoxicated expression and called sweetly, "Meng Lang, don't be evasive." Meng Lang, Arbor. She really had to hand it to Mu Dongni. Fan Meng had a fearful look on her face and didn't want to have any contact with her at all. Yet, this fellow kept rubbing herself against Fan Meng's body. That impatient look was simply unbearable to watch. How did the Mu clan produce such an idiot? The little stoic sat next to them with a sullen face and watched them tug at each other for a long time. Chila, a large part of Fan Meng's sleeve was torn off by Mu Dongni. Her beautiful face turned pale as she retreated. Mu Dongni was almost drooling. She pounced on young Master Fan Meng, wanted to push him to the ground. The little guy who was sitting on the side and watching the show couldn't take it anymore. He picked up a vase and smashed it on Mu Dongni's head. Fan Meng stared blankly at the vase that suddenly flew up and smashed into Mu Dongni's head. She looked around in horror. Mu Dongni was also stunned. Her head was covered in blood. She turned her head and stared back. Who hit me? Who is it?" Arbor raised his leg and sent Mu Dongni flying out in front of him. That fellow rolled out and knocked her head against the doorframe. She instantly fainted miserably. Chapter 4010. If Fan Meng still couldn't tell that there was someone else in the room now, then she would be an idiot. He hastily tugged at his clothes that had slipped down and anxiously looked around the room. Which expert? Please show yourself." The little stoic stuck an appearance talisman on herself and expressionlessly appeared in front of Fan Meng. Fan Meng immediately widened her eyes and looked at her in surprise and delight. You? The little stoic lady. Arbor rolled his eyes. How is she stoic? Heh, you're the stoic one. Your whole family is stoic. Fan Ming, Fan Ming. Hurried footsteps came from outside the door. Immediately after, the door to the room was forcefully pushed open twice before it opened a crack with great difficulty. A handsome man in plain clothes squeezed in from outside. He looked down and discovered that Mu Dongni, that fool, was blocking the door. She was lying behind the door with her hair covered in blood, making it difficult to open the room door. Fan Yu, I'm fine. Fan Ming stood up and turned to nod at her companion with a smile. Fan Yu quickly walked up and glanced at the little stoic. She suddenly laughed and said, Redcoat and the others were all saying that the little stoic lady came. I thought they were lying. The little stoic looked at them expressionlessly. She looked down at her youthful attire and couldn't resist protesting. Which eye did you use to see this lord's attire? Damn, how should I address the stoic lady? Fan Yu blinked and asked. Ciao. The little stoic waved her small hand and was about to walk outside. Fan Yu suddenly reached out to block her and said with a grin, Miss Jojo, you've done our Fan Ming a great favor, so we must properly thank you. This place is unbearably filthy. How about we change to another room for you? Sir Jojo hastily waved her small hand. No need. She wasn't here to drink tea. What was she waiting for when she didn't find anything strange after rummaging through the room for so long? Of course, she should immediately stroll back to the palace and act like nothing happened. Wait, Miss Jojo? When the little stoic saw Fan Yu reach out to block her again, a hint of displeasure flitted through her eyes. She still had some impressions of these two people. When she first came to the House of Spring, the two of them had taught her a lot of things while chatting with her. Later, she even confessed to Jojo's lotus thump, thump, thump. Hurried footsteps could be heard from the corridor outside, accompanied by Seven Flowers' messy cries. Hey, young master, you can't just barge in. Young master, young master. Hey, you. Arbor's heart skipped a beat. He had a bad feeling. With a bang, the door of the private room was kicked flying. Poor Mu Dongni, who was lying at the door, was smashed to the ground by the flying door. Mu Dongni, who had just woken up, fainted again after being patted like that. Xiao Mu quivered in fright and hastily shoved away Fan Yu, who was blocking in front of her. She sprinted towards the window with a whoosh and jumped down from the window with her clothes fluttering in the wind. Hey, young lady. Fan Yu pulled Fan Ming to the door and lowered her head to take a look. She saw that the young lady had already jumped onto the street on the first floor. She fled faster than a rabbit and blended into the crowd in a flash. Mo Lien chased after them and expressionlessly glanced at the little fellow who had blended into the crowd. A small, treacherous glint surfaced in her eyes. She was quite capable. She even dared to flee without a trace when she saw her husband running over. Chapter 4011. Did she think she could escape like this? Haha, truly a naive Jojo. Mo Lien pursed her lips and turned around to glare coldly at the seven blossoms who had caught up to her. She then jumped down from the window and disappeared into the crowd in a flash. The people in the room looked at each other in bewilderment. After Arbor ran down the stairs, he naturally planned to sneak back to the Eastern Palace. This way, the little fellow would be able to deny that he had left just now. Humph! It wasn't like he was caught by hubby. After Sir Jojo made up his mind, he flipped out his heavenly horsetail feather and jumped on it. He leisurely floated up into the sky and flew towards the Eastern Palace. It was already late at night. Other than the bustling red lights and spring full house and the hubbub of voices, the dark streets were basically empty. The heavenly horsetail feather's flying speed could be fast or slow at will. Sir Jojo was anxious to return home, so he naturally made it fly as fast as possible. Just as he flew to the palace gates, he saw the resplendent palace lanterns in the distance, illuminating them with a magnificent light. Sir Jojo didn't care at first. In any case, no one dared to stop her when she left the palace. Who dared to stop her now that she was back? However, when a heavenly horsetail feather flew closer and saw the slender figure standing silently on top of the palace tower that was several dozen meters tall, it was already too late to run away. She hastily turned the heavenly horsetail feather around, wanted to slip away unexpectedly. A suction force came from the sky and directly pulled her back along with the trembling feather. Swish! The little fellow was expressionlessly pulled back. Her eyes darted around rapidly, and she was carried into someone's arms without any explanation. The little crown princess obediently stayed still and blinked. She turned around to look at her husband, who was smiling at her with his head lowered. "Hubby, someone attacked me just now." "Oh, then wife, did you clearly see who attacked you?" The little stoic shook her head repeatedly. "He was masked and ran off without a trace. I suspect that this person is very strange." Emollient nodded and looked at her with a smile. She gently touched her little face with her finger. "Jojo." Sir Jojo looked at him with a serious expression, but his heart felt inexplicably weak. Her husband's refreshing appearance was simply too abnormal. If he had yelled at her in exasperation, she would still have some confidence in her heart. But now that he was acting like this strange, really strange. "Jojo, does this dress fit you?" Emollient smiled and tugged at her sleeve. "The sleeves are very long." Arbor hurriedly reached out and hugged his neck. He closed his eyes and snuggled into his embrace. "Husband, it's very late. I want to sleep." Hearing her husband's low chuckle, Jojo couldn't help but feel that no matter how she heard it, it was terrifying. "My wife seems to have too much energy." Emollient curled his lips and floated down the palace tower with his wife in his arms. He strolled leisurely toward the Eastern Palace. Behind him were rows of guards who acted as a backdrop. Everyone looked down and did not say anything that was inappropriate. "Nothing happened tonight, haha." His Highness the Crown Prince didn't stand on the city gate tower, waiting to be caught and run out of the palace. No. The little Crown Princess didn't run at all. Woo they saw what they shouldn't have seen and knew what they shouldn't know. Would they be silenced by His Highness in a fit of rage later? Arbor originally wanted to pretend to sleep, but who knew she really fell asleep? When she woke up, it was already late in the morning. She moved her small arms and legs, and her face immediately turned bitter. Chapter 40:12. I see that my wife seems to have excess energy. Stinky Lotus's words were still echoing in her ears. She had become like this today. The little fellow moved her uncomfortable little body and slowly moved to the ground with a bitter face. How could this person be so vile? Didn't he just sneak out for a stroll? He actually tormented her for an entire night. She remembered that she was tormented awake in the middle of the night, groggy and half awake. She didn't know what kind of medicine this bad guy blew on her, but now her whole body felt uncomfortable. Her small hands and feet were also somewhat weak, infuriating. She vowed not to beg for mercy, and even more so, she couldn't be weak. The little crown princess moved to the ground and immediately made an I-O sound. She put her hands on her waist and frowned pitifully. "Crown princess, you're awake." Kai-Chi and Kai-Shio were holding toiletries, clothes, shoes, and socks as they walked in with a smile, looking at her with pursed lips. Arbor was expressionless as he sat upright on the edge of the bed. He stretched out a pair of small paws and said, "Change clothes." Kai-Shio was overjoyed. The crown princess usually didn't need their help. Now that she suddenly had a mischievous look, it was really fun to look at. After helping the little crown princess change clothes and wash up, Kai-Shio pursed her lips and said with a smile, "Crown Princess, His Highness just brought a lot of books from the Imperial Hospital for you. You'll have books to read during this period of time. His Highness wants you to read books after breakfast. He'll be back in the afternoon." Jojo scolded him 3 times in a row. Looking at the servants bringing in boxes of books, there was no change in her expression, but her heart was a little broken. Jojo's Lotus was really too vile. He actually found so many books for her and urged her to stay at home to read and not go out for a stroll. Oomph. The little girl expressionlessly held a small spoon and sent a mouthful of bird's nest porridge into her mouth. She glanced at Kai-Shio, standing at the side. "I want to go home," the little girl said expressionlessly. Kai-Shio pursed her lips and nodded. His Highness said that he'll be back in the afternoon to accompany the crown princess back. Umph. The little crown princess was a little angry. She took a look at the time and realized that it was almost noon. Thus, he asked, "Didn't you say you'd be back at noon? Where is he?" Kai Chi covered her mouth and laughed. "Crown Princess, perhaps His Highness was delayed by a small matter. Could it be that the Crown Prince Consort is hungry again after having breakfast?" The little Crown Princess rolled her eyes. While they were talking, Kai Chi hurriedly ran in from outside the door. She bowed and said, reporting to the Crown Princess, "Empress Dowager, Chun sent someone to pass on a message. Lunch will be served at Nanjing Court in the Imperial Garden. Please invite the Crown Princess over." Kai Xiu straightened her face and slightly frowned. The little Crown Princess, however, had already pulled a long face in displeasure. Who knew what this old lady was up to? Ever since the incident with old Madame Chiao, Arbor no longer had any patience for this kind of old fogey who took advantage of her seniority. "Go and reply to the person who passed on the message. Just say that this Crown Princess is not feeling well and will not be attending." "Hey, Mama, you can't barge in." "Barge in, eh? I don't know where the Crown Princess is feeling unwell. This old servant can ask the Empress Dowager to send a doctor from the Imperial Hospital to come and treat the Crown Princess." A rude and unreasonable voice cut in. It pushed aside the few palace maids and eunuchs who were blocking it, and directly led a group of valiant women to barge in. Chapter 40:13. The old woman in front of her had a fierce-looking face and didn't look like one of the palace's old nannies. Instead, she looked a bit like a hired thug. As for the 7 to 8 sturdy nannies behind her, each of them were also tall and sturdy. They were the type that could hang 2 little royal maids up with a single punch. Arbor stared at them with a dark expression. She raised her hand slightly and had several maidservants, who tried their best to stop the nannies but couldn't, retreat to the side. "This Crown Princess doesn't feel well anywhere," Arbor coldly stated. "Go to the Imperial Hospital and invite a physician over first." The old woman in the lead was slightly startled, most likely not expecting that the little Crown Princess, whose lies she had exposed, could still calmly continue her previous words. She crossed her arms with a disdainful expression. "This old servant sees that the Crown Princess complexion is rosy and her spirit is quite good. She doesn't look like she's sick anywhere. The Crown Princess couldn't have purposely rejected Her Majesty the Empress Dowager's invitation and pretended to be sick, right?" Arbor looked at her coldly and indifferently muttered, "Li." Li abruptly scuttled in through the window and stood behind the little Crown Princess, expressionlessly saying, "Crown Princess, go teach her a lesson." The little Crown Princess expressionlessly spoke with a frosty expression on her delicate, stoic face. "Yes." Li cupped her fists and quickly walked up. She swung her arm twice and suddenly slapped that old woman's face. The old woman saw her walking over aggressively and already had a bad feeling in her heart. Now that she really swung her arm to slap her, she instantly shouted in exasperation, "You little wench, you dare? Io!" Before she could finish her nonsense, a large slap landed on her face. That old woman was indeed fierce-looking and had boundless strength, but that was only in front of several delicate palace maids. When she encountered a spiritual realm expert like Li Yi, she didn't have the slightest bit of strength to retaliate. A slap immediately landed on her face, and her face was immediately slapped crooked. "Zhao Mama." The old nannies behind her felt their hearts beating wildly. They looked at the expressionless Crown Princess in shock. The young Crown Prince Consort was really going to attack them without a second word. If she still had the Empress Dowager in her heart, she would not have acted so ruthlessly and mercilessly to them. It was obvious that he didn't put Empress Dowager Chun in his eyes at all. The fierce-looking old woman, Granny Zhao, was so angry that her whole body trembled. She was an old granny by the Empress Dowager's side. Usually, she was in charge of the affairs of the outer court, with a strong body, who dared to make trouble for her. In all these years, she had never been wronged like this in the palace. How could she be slapped by a little maid serving the Crown Princess? This was intolerable. "What are you all still standing there for?" Granny Zhao snapped. "Suppress this little bitch for me. I'll kill her today." "Who does Granny Zhao want to kill?" A bone-chilling voice suddenly sounded from the doorway. Granny Zhao and the others turned around in shock and hurriedly knelt down in greeting. Greetings to your highness, the crown prince. Greetings to your highness, the crown prince. Mo Yin's handsome face was cold as he slowly walked in with his hands behind his back. Seeing the mess on the floor, he couldn't help but frown. Who allowed you old shrews to barge into the bedchamber? What big guts! Granny Zhao and the others trembled as they secretly complained incessantly in their hearts. Chapter 4014. Why did this master return so quickly? Could it be that he didn't encounter Miss Chun along the way? Granny Zhao complained in her heart, secretly cursing that Miss Chun for being incompetent. She couldn't even delay a man. This really wasn't going to be easy to clean up. Granny Zhao hurriedly smiled apologetically. It was us servants who overstepped our bounds. We servants deserve to die 10,000 deaths. We shouldn't have impatiently barged into the bedchamber. We servants will leave now. You do deserve to die. Prince Mo coldly cut her off and nodded with an indifferent expression. Come. Several guards had been waiting outside for a long time, but they had always been well trained. Without the male and female master summons, they naturally wouldn't take a single step into the inner hall. When they heard His Highness calling for them, they immediately swarmed in and called out in unison, Your Highness. Drag them all out and execute them. Prince Mo coldly said, without the slightest fluctuation in his expression. Granny Zhao and the others' expressions abruptly changed. They abruptly raised their heads and looked in horror at the Crown Prince's grim expression. His Highness the Crown Prince actually ordered them to be executed? How could this be? His Highness really didn't give them any face at all, these old people by the Empress Dowager's side? Granny Zhao trembled. When she saw the guards come forward to drag them away, she hurriedly cried out, Your Highness, spare us, Your Highness. We servants are under the Empress Dowager's orders to specially invite the Crown Princess Wu. Wu. The rest of her words were clearly blocked by the guards, and she couldn't say anything else. Soon, the sound of bamboo slamming could be heard from outside the bedchamber. The efficiency of the Crown Prince's subordinates naturally didn't need to be mentioned. The little girl blinked and snorted at the man strolling over. She turned her little head to the side, not looking at this guy. Mo Yin walked to the little girl's side. Just as she was about to reach out to hug her, she saw the little thing jump off the couch and waved her little hand with an unhappy expression. Your family is too annoying. I'm going home now. Mo Yin's hand paused in midair. She hurriedly flashed and blocked her path. She raised her hand and pulled her into her embrace. Want to run again? Who ran away? The little guy waved his little hand, and his little eyes glanced at him strangely. I'll come back when your old lady stops. She'll stop soon, killing those people and then sending them back. Presumably, with his bloody methods, no one would dare to cause trouble in the Eastern Palace for at least a month. I also find it annoying, my wife. Mo Yin nuzzled her head. How about hubby accompany you home? Arbor rolled his eyes at him and said calmly in a strange tone, You've been following me to my mother's house all day, so your old lady must have something to say. Just wait and see. She won't stop today. Mo Yin raised his eyebrows and rubbed against his wife. She's so annoying. Qiao Mu chuckled in response. And it was more than just a little annoying. Because of what had happened to Chen Baojia. Old madam, ye had been very displeased with her. Now that the Crown Prince had killed several of her capable nannies and thrown them back, who knew how much of fuss she was going to make? Just wait and see. She'll be annoyed. Sure enough, in less than 2 hours, the young couple received the news that the Emperor had summoned them. They looked at each other. The little fellow was so angry that she rolled her eyes at her husband. She was still angry about yesterday's torment. She wasn't feeling well today, and he was still causing trouble for her all day long. Chapter 4015. Wife. Mo Yin pulled her small hand and winked at her with a grin. Don't be angry. Hubby will deal with them. Sir Jojo cast him a sidelong glance. So you're saying that you have a countermeasure? Mo Yin nodded solemnly with a cheated expression. Mother's illness is more or less healed, so it's time for her to come out and walk around more. Let's go pick up Mother first before going to see Royal Father. Arbor couldn't help but twitch his mouth. When he thought of the pitiful emperor, he couldn't help but silently light a candle for him in his heart. You raised such a cheated son. Do you know what's going on? Wife, what's with that look? Emol Yin poked her small face with a smile and lowered his head to whisper in her ear. Don't be angry with hubby anymore, all right? Hubby will definitely handle this matter properly. He stole a kiss and winked at her with a grin. Sir Jojo cast him an irritated glance. If it weren't for this guy tormenting her until she was completely exhausted, how could she have rejected elderly lady's invitation right off the bat? If she had some energy, she would have played with elderly lady. It wasn't like she was afraid of her. The young couple sat in the carriage and strolled to the emperor's zenith palace. They weren't in a hurry to see the emperor, so they ran to see their mother first. When the empress heard that her son and daughter had come, she was very happy. Her originally pale cheeks were now flushed with warmth. When Prince Immerse saw his mother, he aggrievedly grabbed his wife's small hand and ran over. As soon as they met, he complained to Her Majesty the Empress, "Mother, your son's wife is about to be bullied to death." This cheated crown prince blabbered on and on about how the Queen Dowager allowed a wicked servant to trespass into the Eastern Palace's bedchamber, and even spoke nonsense to her own daughter-in-law, and refused to be disciplined. After he ordered someone to beat her to death in a fit of rage, the Queen Dowager wanted to make trouble for them, and so on. Regardless of whether it was right or wrong, complained first. The little stoic expressionlessly sat on the small stool in front of the empress and obediently placed her two small hands on her knees. Her pitiful appearance immediately entered the hearts of everyone in the empress's palace. The empress glanced at her silent daughter-in-law and was immediately filled with righteous indignation. These wicked servants are really bold. The maids and palace maids around the empress were the confidants of the emperor and the empress. These past few years, she didn't leave her residence and stayed in the underground ice palace to take care of Her Majesty, so she didn't know much about the little stoic, this crown princess. After hearing the crown prince's description, they all secretly sympathized with the little crown princess. She was so young and didn't have any background in the imperial city. She was bullied by the old madam every day. How pitiful. Come with me to see your father. The empress was furious. He got up and ordered the servants to change their clothes. He planned to accompany his son and daughter-in-law to the imperial study to have a good talk with the great emperor. Mother, Prince Immerse said aggrievedly, a few days ago, Jojo needed a relatively quiet environment in order to make the soul-returning pill for Mother. The palace was too noisy, so we moved to Jojo's maiden home for a while. However, the old madam bore a grudge against Jojo. A certain little person obediently sat on the small stool without uttering a word. The empress pulled her up with heartache and stroked the child's head. It's been hard on our Jojo. Don't worry, I'll go talk to your father. We can't let people wrongly accuse you. The empress was displeased and muttered softly, "You've been tormented like a day for several decades." Chapter 4016. The little crown princess was led out by her husband with an inexplicable expression. Before leaving, she looked curiously at the old and young palace maids beside the empress. They were all looking at her with a sympathetic gaze. What were they doing? The little crown princess didn't know that in the crown prince's explanation, these people had already imagined scenes of the little crown princess being bullied and humiliated. One of the old nannies even wiped away her tears with emotion. This was really a beautiful misunderstanding. In the great emperor's imperial study, Mo Lusheng had a headache as he looked at the crying old lady sitting there. Princess Yin Yun awkwardly accompanied Empress Dowager Chun, not knowing how to comfort this heartbroken old lady. Since 2 hours ago, when she received the news that the old maids she sent to the Eastern Palace were all killed by the crown prince, the old lady almost fainted from anger. The old Empress Dowager, who ran to the great emperor to make a decision, cried 2 times in front of him O Lusheng with snot and tears, causing the great emperor to have a headache. When she thought of her son, she couldn't help but want to call him over to scold him. Since you've messed with the old lady, then you should deter her until the end, okay? Look at what you're doing now. the old lady came to make a fuss in front of him. The Empress has arrived. The Crown Prince and the Crown Princess have arrived. The two announcements made the unprepared Mo Lushing and Empress Dowager Chen's hearts skip a beat. Especially Empress Dowager Chen, her eyes narrowed. She had experienced the Empress's daughter-in-law in the past. That unruly temper. It might even be worse than the Crown Princess. Ever since she woke up, the old lady wanted to summon the Empress several times, but was stopped by the great Emperor on the grounds that his wife had just recovered from serious illness and couldn't go out to meet people. Now that they suddenly met in the imperial study, it was unexpected. Mo Lucian and the old lady were in two completely different moods. When he heard that his wife came with those two brats, he knew that those two brats definitely didn't have good intentions and went to ask his wife to come over to support them. It was hard to believe that those two brats could be so deceitful. Mo Lucian expressionlessly looked up at the three people who came in. His originally taut, handsome face couldn't help but soften a bit when he saw his wife. She quickly walked out from behind the desk and greeted by Wuxia. She then turned to glare at Mo Lien grumpily as she reprimanded. Your royal mother's body hasn't fully recovered yet. How can such a trivial matter alarm your royal mother? If I didn't come, who knows how my daughter-in-law would be bullied? The emperor was a bit dumbfounded and glanced at the little stoic suspiciously. What did these two brats say to their wife? Why did his wife look like she was protecting her empress with their arrogant and unreasonable temperaments? How could they be bullied by others? Was there a big misunderstanding? Wuxia. Mo Lushing pulled her small hand, chuckling as he smoothed things over. How could that be? Little glutinous Dumpling's wife was not easy to deal with. His wife had been kept in the dark by these two brats and thought that they were good people. What was she supposed to do? Bai Wuxia brusquely pushed away the great emperor's hand and turned to look at the furious Empress Dowager Chen. I haven't seen the Empress Dowager in many years. Seeing you today, the Empress Dowager's graceful bearing is still the same. Empress Dowager Chen's lips twitched with a fake smile. Chapter 4017. Bai Wuxia was helped to sit down by Mo Lushing. The Empress Dowager sat opposite her and watched. Seeing this scene, she pursed her lips. The great emperor was really considerate to this empress. He really doted on her for decades. She subconsciously raised her hand and patted Princess Yin Yun's small hand. Princess Yin Yun's expression was a little stiff. In the past, her status was already awkward enough with the princesses and infanta of the various small countries who were sent to the palace. But at least the empress had not woken up at that time. Even if they were awkward, they could live in the palace without any worries. It could be considered that they had asked for protection. But now the empress had woken up. She didn't know how she would live in the future. However, she, Yin Yun, wasn't the kind of person who wanted to interfere with the relationship between the great emperor and the empress. She wasn't like the other princesses who wanted to be by the great emperor's side for years. Of course, those women who wanted to do something with the great emperor were all sent out of the palace without mercy. In the end, it was people like them who didn't want to improve, who barely survived in the depths of the palace. Although the days were rather hard, at least they were living in peace and stability, weren't they? In fact, the reason why they lived a stable life was definitely because they had been forgotten by the great emperor. She didn't want to interfere in today's matter. She didn't have the status or the ability to interfere. However, Empress Dowager Chen pulled her and cried. She had no choice but to be pulled into the imperial study by the Empress Dowager. It wasn't that she didn't know what the Empress Dowager was thinking. She was looking for all kinds of opportunities to matchmake her and the great emperor, but this also depended on the situation, didn't it? Mo Lushing was deeply in love with Bai Wuxia. That had been the same for decades. Could she, a small Yin Yun, change the situation? She wasn't so shameless to think that she was so capable. She, Yin Yun, knew very well what kind of position she had. Only smart people could live long. Princess Yin Yun sighed and stood up straight. She raised her head and stuck out her chest. With the bearing of a princess, she bowed to the great emperor and the empress. Although she was only the princess of a small country like Zhuxiai Nation, she represented the dignity of Zhuxiai Nation. Bai Wuxia's gaze fell on her face and looked her up and down. When he turned to the Empress Dowager, there was a hint of a smile in his eyes. I heard that the Empress Dowager has been very idle for more than 10 years. Emol Yoshing's heart jumped. Empress Dowager Chen also uncomfortably shifted her body. She tried to sit up straight and said with a dignified expression, "I don't know what the Empress means." The Empress smiled sweetly. For the past 10 years, the Empress Dowager has been thinking about taking a concubine for my husband all the time. Isn't it because she has nothing better to do? Empress Dowager Chen's face instantly turned red. Do you have nothing to do? This daughter-in-law of his was still as annoying as ever. It was better for her to be unconscious. She had lived a comfortable life for more than 10 years. The moment he woke up, he returned to this dead state. Just looking at him made one's teeth ache. AI, this Empress has been lying down for more than 10 years. Things have remained the same, but people have changed. Bai Wuxia took out a handkerchief and wiped the non-existent tears at the corner of his eyes. He said faintly, "Now anyone can climb on top of this Empress's head and behave atrociously." Emol Yoshing's eyelids kept twitching. Chapter 4018. Mother. Prince Emo immediately snuggled up to his mother's side and said with a pitiful expression, "Mother, don't be sad. If father doesn't want us, your son will take you out of the palace to live." The little crown princess also nodded and added, "Our family is rich." Emo Lushing looked up at the sky, speechlessly. Looking at the three people in front of him, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and the corners of his mouth twitched. This perfect act of singing and acting really did look like she had suffered a great grievance. Empress Dowager Chun was already angered to the point of vomiting blood by Prince Emo and the little crown princess. Now that she saw the Empress' protective behavior, she was even angrier to the point of trembling. She slapped the armrest and said sternly, "Your Majesty, just let them do as they please." The Emperor looked innocent and pitiful. "What can we do? Now that Zhen's wife is here, Zhen has no other choice but to compromise." Empress Dowager Chen looked at the Emperor's innocent face and couldn't help but get angry. She pointed at the Emperor and said with trembling fingers, You. This Empress has been in a coma for more than 10 years. It seems that many people have forgotten what kind of person this Empress was in the past." Bai Wuxiao lightly interrupted Empress Dowager Chen's words and glanced at her. "Empress Dowager, this Empress seems to remember that I seem to have told you 20 years ago. Don't meddle in our husband and wife matters, right?" Empress Dowager Chen's eyelids twitched, and she clenched her fingers in anger. What do you mean? Why have you been like this for decades?" Bai Wuxia's eyes turned completely cold as he stared at Empress Dowager Chun. "In the past, you tormented me, and now you're tormenting the crown princess. When have you ever not tormented her?" "I tormented her." Empress Dowager Chun was so angry that she almost spat out a mouthful of blood. She pointed at the little crown princess's direction with trembling fingers and said with trembling lips, She? Do you think I can do whatever I want to him?" Prince Emo hurriedly took the little crown princess, who was sitting obediently on the side, into his arms and patted her back to comfort her. He turned to Empress Dowager Chun and said, "Empress Dowager, my wife is still young. Don't scare her with your ferocious expression." The corner of Emo Yoshing's mouth twitched, and the corner of his eyes twitched. He could see what kind of show these two black-hearted people were putting on today. They were pretending to be weak and pitiful in front of their mother. If these two were not his son and daughter-in-law, he would definitely slap them to death. The Emperor turned to look at Empress Dowager Chun, whose veins were bulging, and silently mourned for her in his heart. Empress Dowager Chun was trembling with anger. "Bai Wuxia, get straight. I didn't do anything to them today. It was the two of them who killed several old people in my palace. Damn it. If they still had the slightest bit of respect for their grandmother, they definitely wouldn't have done such a heartless and cruel thing. You're forcing me to my death." Empress Dowager Chun was so angry that she beat her chest and wailed. "If your Majesty feels that there's no need for this old body to exist, then drive me to the cold palace. Woo-woo, what's the point of this old body living like this?" Mo Liuxing's eyelids twitched, and he was about to stop her. Bai Wuxia said coldly, "Since the Empress Dowager wants to go to the Cold Palace, then let her." Empress Dowager Chun was dumbfounded. Princess Yin Yin on the side was also dumbfounded. Wah wah wah. What? Empress Dowager Chun opened her mouth wide and couldn't close it for a long time. Chapter 419. Was she really going to drive her to the Cold Palace? Empress Dowager Chin's eyes widened in disbelief. Mo Liuxing's face also revealed a bit of awkwardness. Was the Empress Dowager looking for trouble? It was really as Wuxia said. After more than 10 years, the Empress Dowager had long forgotten what kind of temper Wuxia had. What did Joe cough? Wuxia's temper was so bad that the entire court didn't dare to provoke her back then, let alone a small harem Wuxia. Mo Liuxing saw that the old lady was a bit pitiful and couldn't help but want to plead for the old lady in front of his wife. In the end, his wife glared at him, and he was a bit speechless. The emperor, who had obediently shut his mouth, suddenly realized that his wife might settle accounts with him in the future. He might not even be able to protect himself. "Someone come," Bai Wuxia called out impatiently. "Invite the old lady to the Cold Flower Palace and settle her down." The old lady was so angry that her entire body was trembling. She pointed at Bai Wuxia and said "you" for a long time, but couldn't spit out a word. "Your Majesty, you saw how the Empress treated me so heartlessly, and you didn't say anything?" Empress Dowager Chun cried out. Mo Yin and Arbor sat side by side and couldn't help but roll their eyes at the same time. Was there something wrong with her? She was clearly the one who asked to go to the Cold Palace to live out her days. Why did she blame Mother Empress for being heartless and cold now? No matter how she handled it, it wouldn't end well. Grand Concubine Fong has arrived. Just as they were talking, another announcement came from outside. The Emperor and Empress looked up at the same time and saw a kind-looking old woman walk in and say to them with a smile, "Your Majesty, Empress, this old one is presumptuous." Bai Wuxia's expression softened slightly, and she stood up with a smile. "Grand Concubine, please sit." Grand Concubine Fong sighed and sat down. She raised her hand to pat the sobbing Empress Dowager Chun. "Sister, His Majesty has many things to do. We really shouldn't make such a fuss over such a small matter." "Empress, it's indeed not appropriate for the Empress Dowager to go to a place like the Cold Palace." Grand Concubine Fong continued. "The Empress Dowager is old. Please treat her leniently for the sake of the late emperor." Bai Wuxia smiled more and more warmly and sweetly. "Old princess, you don't know. The suggestion of going to the Cold Palace was made by the Empress Dowager herself," she said with an aggrieved expression. "Since the Empress Dowager has said so, as a junior, this consort can only comply." Empress Dowager Chun gritted her teeth. "Shameless. Why don't you comply with other things? Are you here to be respectful to your elders, or to stir up trouble? Whenever you want to obey, whenever you want to disobey, whenever you want to disobey, you disobey. Empress Dowager, you want to go to the Cold Palace and then regret it?" Bai Wuxia glanced at her sarcastically. Old Concubine Fong hurriedly smiled to smooth things over. "Empress." Old Concubine Fong took Bai Wuxia's hand with a smile and patted it gently. "What happened today was probably just a misunderstanding. My sister's people were disobedient and trespassed into the Crown Prince's bedchamber. They deserve to die. Empress Dowager, she was just blinded by those wicked servants for a while." Old Concubine Fong looked back at Empress Dowager Chun. The latter's face stiffened. Although he felt depressed, he didn't dare to say anything else. After all, the Empress's words had almost sent her to the Cold Palace. Bai Wuxia looked unhappy. He smiled coldly and looked at Old Concubine Fong, saying, "What if this consort insists on inviting the Empress Dowager to the Cold Palace?" Chapter 4020. Old Concubine Fong's eyes moved, and she hurriedly reached out to stop the Empress Dowager, who was about to jump up. She shook her head with a smile. "Wuxia, you won't." The Empress smiled very gently. "I didn't care about the Empress Dowager in the past, not because I had a good temper, but because I was too lazy to care about her. Old concubine Fong's benevolent face almost fell what the Empress said. It was like slapping the Empress Dowager's face with a backhand. But it's different now. The Empress looked with a smile at the old lady whose face was dark and stiff, and said with a smile, "I have to protect my son and daughter-in-law now, and I have to protect my grandchildren in the future. I can't always let some random people step on my son and daughter-in-law's heads." His Majesty has a good temper and doesn't want to care about the old lady. The Empress's face darkened, and she said coldly, "Empress Dowager, what kind of temper do I have? Shouldn't you think about it?" Empress Dowager Chen's face turned green, black, and white in a flash. It didn't take long for her face to change a few colors. Old concubine Fong's face was also a bit twisted. She forced a smile and said, "Sister Empress Dowager is old. She will think about it more, and she will remember it." Think about it. Think about what? Think about how she was defeated by the Empress in the past. Empress Dowager Chen's face was very ugly. She didn't want to stay here and make a fool of herself anymore. She stood up and waved her hand, saying with a sneer, "The Empress insists on protecting her, and I have no other choice. In this case, I can only go to Mount Heaven Saint to worship the former emperor and let him judge for me." Old concubine Fong's face stiffened. She really wanted to slap this brainless old sister's face. She finally persuaded the Empress and didn't hesitate to put down her old face and smile. In the end, it was all ruined by this old woman's words. As expected, the Empress's face darkened. She raised her hand and shouted, "Tian Sha." A black shadow suddenly landed in the study, bowed, and didn't say anything. "In this case, you lead the people and let the deputy commander of the Imperial Army accompany you. Send the Empress Dowager to Mount Heaven Saint to fast and pray for the former emperor. You don't have to come back for at least 2 to 3 months. After all, praying for blessings for 1, 2, 3, or 5 days is useless." "Yes, Your Majesty." The shadow guard named Tian Sha responded coldly and turned to look at the dumbfounded Empress Dowager. "Your Highness, please." Empress Dowager Chen almost spat out a mouthful of poisonous blood. Her finger trembled as she pointed at the Empress. You. She looked anxiously at the Emperor. Unexpectedly, the Emperor had already pretended to sit back down beside the table. He picked up a booklet from the side and flipped it upside down in front of his eyes, reading with great interest. Humph! He knew that the Emperor had no right to speak in front of his wife. The Empress Dowager flew into a rage. She flicked her sleeves and walked out unwillingly. The Empress stood up and said, respectfully sending off the Empress Dowager. The veins on Empress Dowager Chen's face bulged. Consort Dowager Fong looked at them speechlessly, sighed, and said with a smile, "Then this old one will go back first. Old Imperial concubine, take care." Consort Dowager Fong sighed again. Before she walked out, she looked at Arbor's face. The little girl had a very obedient expression. She sat beside Prince Imo and didn't say anything, watching the show from beginning to end. Chapter 4021. After the two old ladies left, the servants silently closed the door to the imperial study, leaving the family of 4 to stare at each other. Imo Liuxing's face was stern as he suddenly slammed the table. "Imo Lian, Father summoned you for questioning. You're good. You made the first move and brought your mother here." This son of a fraud. The more he looked at him, the more he wanted to grab him and beat him up. Without waiting for Prince Imo to speak, Bai Wuxiao looked at her husband with dissatisfaction. "Why are you yelling at our son?" Prince Imo very cooperatively threw himself behind his mother and pitifully called out, "Mother." Empress Bai's heart was about to melt from her son's call. She angrily glared at the emperor. It was clearly that old woman who schemed against them. "Why are you yelling at him?" Imo Liuxing couldn't help but want to laugh bitterly. He hurriedly walked over and tugged at his wife's small hand. "Wuxia, I was just talking to little glutinous dumpling. This child, he didn't know how to control his strength. He killed a few old people by the Empress Dowager's side." Bai Wuxia snorted and glanced at him with dissatisfaction. "If they weren't looking for death, why would my son lower himself to their level?" Emperor! Exclamation point. What you said makes sense, but you don't know the fraud of our lives. Bai Wuxiao pulled Emolian and Arbor's hands and said angrily, I didn't know that my son's life was so difficult. Even a random dog slave could barge into their sleeping quarters. The old lady can casually scold them. We can't live like this. The young couple nodded in agreement. Their obedient appearance made the emperor grind his teeth in anger. Wife, you've been bewitched by these two little bastards. They're not like what you're saying. You didn't see the scene of these two bastards climbing up the roof and demanding debts. Even he, the emperor, had been cheated by them several times. With their pure, evil nature, how could they be bullied by others? Not taking the initiative to bully others was already very righteous. Little glutinous dumpling, Jojo, pack your things and follow mother back to Glory City. It's not comfortable to live in the palace. Let's go home with your grandfather. Bai Wuxiao hugged her son and pretended to cry. Your father doesn't love the three of us. We still have Grandpa. The emperor's handsome face was bitter. He hurriedly pulled his son away and tossed him to the other side of Arbor. He hugged his wife and hurriedly said, All right. Your husband will send someone to send the Empress Dowager to Mount Heaven Saint. He hugged his wife and patted her. Then he turned around and glared at the two of them. The look in his eyes was blatant. Why aren't you getting lost? Mo Yin pursed his lips and reached out to take his wife's small hand, leading her out of the imperial study. The two of them circled around the room and came to the window at the back of the imperial study. At the same time, they crouched there and looked inside. From where they were, they could clearly see their father's deflated face. The two of them looked at each other silently, covering their mouths as they laughed. Who told you to find fault with us? Now you've kicked an iron plate. Bai Wuxia said angrily. You've been living a carefree life while I wasn't here. How could that be? Mo Lusheng hurriedly said. It's not carefree at all. I heard that there are many women like Princess Yin hidden in His Majesty's back garden. Nonsense. Mo Lusheng hurriedly denied. I don't know any of them. Bai Wuxia snorted. I also heard that the Empress Dowager wants to marry you a concubine. Chapter 4022. Wife. Mo Lusheng hurriedly begged for mercy with a pitiful expression. I don't recognize any of the things you said above. All these years, I've lived a life that's even more austere than a monk's. If you don't believe me, you can ask Laifu. Mo Lusheng said aggrievedly. Wife, I've waited for you for more than 10 years. My loyalty to you is as clear as the sun and the moon. I've waited bitterly for you. Half of my hair has turned white. Bai Wuxia glanced at his gorgeous long black hair and rolled her eyes at him. Looking at his bitter expression, she couldn't help but burst into laughter. In fact, how could she not know the emperor's feelings for her? She was just putting on an act just now. But when she saw the old woman holding Princess Yin Yun's hand in the imperial study, it really made her feel a little uncomfortable. The old woman looked at Princess Yin Yun like a mother-in-law looking at her daughter-in-law. It really made her feel nauseous. She didn't know how many beautiful girls the old woman had introduced to her husband while she was unconscious. Fortunately, her husband was upright and wasn't afraid of slanted shadows. Otherwise, who knew how many good sisters would pop out of her family after all these years? The Empress panicked at the thought of these good sisters. The old woman's actions today were simply too irksome. Bai Wuxiao looked up at the Emperor. What do you plan to do with those princesses? Mo Lusheng saw that his wife was angry and immediately said without blinking, Sell them all. Bai Wuxiao was speechless. He pulled out his hand and hit him. Sell what? Did he think that those people were just some maidservants who could be casually sold, just like that? If they were really sold, who knew how those monarchs would come and make a fuss? Bai Wuxiao smiled faintly. What do you think about adding a few more people to Giant Pain Mansion? The Emperor's mouth twitched. Wife, why can't the grudges between you and Giant Pain be smoothed out after more than 10 years? On the surface, the Emperor naturally nodded happily. Good. Giant Pain Mansion will be lively with more people. Bai Wuxia nodded in satisfaction. Arbor leaned over to Mo Yin's ear and whispered, Hubby, Mother is so powerful. Mo Yin nodded. Jojo will have a good life in the future. Then, let's not deal with the old lady in the future, Mo Lien said in a low voice. Leave it to Mother. She can scold the old lady until she starts to doubt her life. Brat, when did you learn to squat in the corner? At the Emperor's bellow, Crown Prince Mo hastily scooped up his wife and ran off like a wisp of smoke. My Joe's section break. Walla splatter. The sound of debris falling to the ground echoed inside and outside Empress Lu's bedroom. How is it possible that we can't find anything? Trash. Trash. A bunch of trash. Empress Lu scolded angrily, her eyes red. The palace maids who were prostrating on the ground had long turned pale. They lowered their heads and didn't dare to raise their heads. The fourth prince hasn't stepped out of his room for the past few days. We can't see anything unusual. Impossible. Empress Lu sharply interrupted the secret guard who was reporting. Go and investigate again. We must find something that can be used against him. I will personally present it to His Majesty and let him see what his good son has done. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. The eunuch's sharp voice sounded. Something bad has happened. Something happened to the crown prince. Leo. Empress Lu's expression changed. Chapter 4023. That eunuch rolled in front of Empress Lu and cried, Your Majesty, please calm down. Your Majesty, please calm down. What exactly happened to the crown prince? Empress Lu was so concerned that she didn't notice the faint dark light that flashed through the old eunuch's eyes. The old eunuch lowered his head and said in a trembling voice, Your Majesty, this servant heard that His Highness the Crown Prince snuck out of the palace tonight and went to Huachu House. Empress Lu was stunned and then asked sternly, Where is it? Well, Huachu Hall. One could tell that it wasn't anything good from the sound of it. The old eunuch lowered his head and cried, It's a brothel. What? Empress Lu widened her eyes in horror. The crown prince went to visit a brothel, and now even the old eunuch beside her knew about it. What did that mean? It meant that the crown prince's matter couldn't be hidden anymore, okay? That wasn't the end of it. The old eunuch lowered his head and said in a low voice, His Highness the Crown Prince got jealous over a woman and got into a fight with a patron of the brothel. In the end, he lost and was carried back to the palace with his head covered in blood. I heard that he even made a fuss about ransoming a prostitute in a brothel. Now the whole court knows about it. Empress Lu's body went limp, and she collapsed to the ground. That eunuch cried and crawled to the Empress's side and said sorrowfully, Your Majesty, take care of your body. Don't worry. Perhaps the source of this news is wrong. Empress Lu struggled to get up and screamed. There must be a mistake. It must be a rumor spread by someone else. How could my leader do that? She knew her son very well. He was a very clean and honest person. All these years, Empress Lu had been looking for a suitable candidate for her son who could help him secure his position as the heir apparent. Her son's brain must have been caught by a door. Why would he go to that brothel and get jealous over a woman? It must be a rumor, a rumor, a rumor. Empress Lu was so angry that she clutched her chest and screamed, It's Old Fourth. It must be that Old Fourth who did this. I want to see His Majesty. I want to see His Majesty. Look at that good son of his, all day long. He's up to no good. When Empress Lu rushed to the door of the hall, she was immediately stopped by someone. Empress, His Majesty has ordered you to be grounded for a month. A sharp light appeared in Empress Lu's eyes. Get out of my way. I want to see His Majesty. I'm sorry, Nyang. We are under His Majesty's order to guard Renchuan Palace. Before His Majesty gives the order to lift the seal, Nyang cannot take half a step out of Renchuan Palace. Empress Lu With a shriek, she pulled her messy long hair and looked at the two guards at the palace gate as if she was looking at a dead person. She said word by word, Both of you, just you wait. The old eunuch followed behind Empress Lu with his head down, a mocking smile on his lips. Her Highness really can't see the situation clearly. What was she waiting for? Her mother's family had already collapsed, and not a single member of her family was left. Did she think that she still had a chance to make a comeback? Don't joke around. Empress Lu couldn't leave Renchuan Palace. She could only pace back and forth in this huge palace. She had already smashed all the furnishings in the palace into smithereens. At this moment, the floor was full of debris, and several junior palace maids were lying on the ground cleaning up. Chapter 4024. Empress Lu paced back and forth in the palace, and her eyes turned cold. What is fourth prince doing now? The old eunuch lowered his head and said in a low voice, His Highness has been sent to Fengyang City by His Majesty to negotiate with the Shenzhou army. Why him? She had heard that the Shenzhou army stationed 1 million soldiers in the border village of Fengyang City. Even if His Majesty was unwell, he shouldn't have sent fourth prince for such an important matter. The old eunuch lowered his eyes and said softly, It is said that His Majesty originally wanted to send His Highness the Crown Prince to deal with this matter. But now His Highness made a big fuss because of a prostitute in the Huachu Club, and his reputation is really bad. Empress Lu covered her chest and looked like she was going to faint again. Impossible. How could her leader become like this for no reason? The old eunuch continued. Besides, the commander of the Shenzhou army specifically asked His Highness the Fourth Prince to discuss this matter. For this reason, His Majesty has given His Highness the transfer of 700,000 fierce tiger soldiers to His Highness. Empress Lu widened her eyes in disbelief. No, that's impossible. Impossible. The old eunuch lowered his eyes and sighed. It is a foregone conclusion. Empress Lu smashed the things around her, and then she was stunned when her hand touched the air. It turned out that there was nothing left to smash in her bedchamber. The old eunuch lowered his eyes and looked submissive, but secretly he curled his lips in sarcasm. What empress of the central palace? She was like a lunatic. No wonder His Majesty disliked her more and more. When she encountered some things, she could only smash and smash. She had no other choice. As he was thinking, the Empress said sharply, Secret guards. The old eunuch's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately looked up to dissuade her. Your Highness, if you let the secret guards take you out now, you will only anger heaven more. If I continue to be locked in this palace, I won't even know if the outside world changes. Your Highness, please be careful with your words, the old eunuch said hurriedly. I can't be careful, Empress Lu screamed. Secret guards, secret guards. 2 secret guards in black immediately flashed in through the window and saluted with hands folded. Your Highness, to the Crown Prince's Eastern Palace. She wanted to go to her son's place and see what was going on. A moment later, the 2 guards at the gate of Inchan Palace fell in a pool of blood. Under the protection of the secret guards, the Empress hurried to the Crown Prince's Eastern Palace. Before she reached the bedroom, she heard a burst of laughter from outside the door. The Empress was so angry that her eyes turned red when she heard the voices of these wild bees and butterflies. She ordered someone to kick open the door of the Eastern Palace. The scene of wine and meat in front of her made her tremble with anger. In just a few days, the Crown Prince had actually dug out a large pond in his bedroom. More than a dozen half-dressed young girls were sitting around Crown Prince Rongley. Some of them were delivering wine, while others were pinching fruits. Many pairs of seductive eyes followed the sound and glanced over. Get out, all of you! Empress Lu's sharp voice resounded throughout the Eastern Palace. The men and women who were indulging in their passion all trembled in fear. It's Mother Empress. Crown Prince Rongley leaned against the soft bodies of the 2 women like a spineless shrimp. He raised his hand and toasted Empress Lu, who was standing above the pool with an inexplicable expression. Chapter 4025. Empress Lu's entire body trembles with anger. She points at Crown Prince Rongley, who is slumped on top of a woman, and says in a stern voice, You, look at what you've become. Get out here right now. Rongley frowns, revealing a regretful expression. Mother, look at what you're saying. What's wrong with air? Air, this is what it means to truly enjoy life. The little eunuch who delivered the wine and fruits to the Crown Prince walks over from the door with his head lowered. Empress Lu's anger turns to hatred, and she sends the eunuch flying with a slap. The fruits on the plate are scattered all over the floor. Rongley hurriedly stands up from the pool. Empress Lu then awkwardly discovers that besides a dozen beautiful women, there are two slender men with very good looks beside her son. Empress Lu is stunned on the spot. Could it be that her son has now become bisexual? She staggers and is about to fall to the ground. The two eunuchs hurriedly come forward to support her. Empress Lu angrily brushes away the two eunuchs' hands and says sternly, "Liu, how did you become like this? You're actually willing to degrade yourself like this?" Rong Li's expression is displeased. Just as he is about to speak, he can't stop coughing violently. Empress Lu hurriedly steps forward again, calling the Crown Prince over and over again. "Crown Prince, don't be so unrestrained." Empress Lu advises earnestly, "Your body has always been weak, and you've always paid great attention to taking care of your body. How can you become like this now, unrestrained? Things are different now, mother," Rong Li says impatiently. "Now, Imperial Father has one foot in the coffin. Do I still need to be so cautious? I'm the Crown Prince, second only to one person and above tens of thousands." He straightens his back and says disapprovingly, "I can do whatever I want. Who can control me?" Crown Prince. Empress Lu is anxious and angry. She wants nothing more than to knock open her son's head and see for herself if his brain is filled with paste. Why is he suddenly behaving in such a disorderly manner? Do you know how many people in the imperial court are impeaching you because of your unrestrained behavior? Who dares to impeach this crown prince? Rong Li shouted angrily, "Mother, tell me, which old man is impeaching me behind my back? I'm going to kill these old slaves right now." Empress Lu was so angry at her son that her heart ached. She grabbed her clothes and gasped for breath. "Son, even at such an important moment like this, you can't make a single mistake. Do you think your father has no other sons? Second brother and third brother are eyeing your position. And that despicable fourth brother, your maternal grandfather's family, was killed by him. You don't think about how to take revenge for your grandfather. Instead, you spend your days in a drunken stupor hanging out with these sluts." Empress Lu burst into tears. She grabbed her son's sleeve tightly and tried her best to persuade him. "You've hurt my heart too much." However, Rong Li looked extremely impatient. He shook off his mother's hand and said, all right, stop talking. Isn't it annoying to talk about you by my ear all day long? Don't worry. Once I ascend the throne, you'll be the Empress Dowager with incomparable honor and wealth. Naturally, you'll have endless enjoyment in the future. Chapter 4026. "Oh, you're so confident?" A cold voice suddenly came from the door. The mother and son were stunned. They both turned their heads and met the Sangzhou Emperor's cold eyes. Those eyes were so cold and merciless that anyone who saw them would feel fear. Empress Lu's heart trembled. She hurriedly knelt down and cried out, "Your Majesty, the Crown Prince is drunk. He was just talking nonsense. You can't take it seriously." "Mother, it's too far-fetched to say that." The second prince stood at the door and said with a smile, "I think the Crown Prince's royal brother is very sober. I didn't expect that. I'm not dead yet, but the Crown Prince can't wait to ascend the throne. No, it's not like that, Your Majesty." Empress Lu knelt down and cowed out. "The Crown Prince is talking nonsense after he's drunk. You can't take it seriously. I think he's speaking the truth after he's drunk." The Sangzhou Emperor angrily rebuked. His cold eyes fell on the Crown Prince, who looked like a quail. Rong Li shrunk his neck and pretended to be a coward. When he saw the Emperor's sharp eyes, he immediately knelt on the ground and kowtowed again and again. "Father, please forgive me. Father, please spare my life. I spoke nonsense after drinking. Please forgive me." "Ah!" The Sangzhou Emperor sneered. His hesitant eyes swept over him. Then his eyes fell on the men and women in messy clothes kneeling and trembling on the ground. "Rong Li, since you won't be the Crown Prince, then I'll make the decision and order you to be deposed." A trace of pride flashed in the second prince's eyes. His hard work was not in vain. As soon as he received the news that the Empress was kicked out of the palace, he led the Emperor to watch such a good show. This big brother's been too helpful recently. He didn't know if he was controlled by something, but his temperament changed so much that he was floating. There were so many impeachment memorials in the imperial court, and this big brother did so many stupid things. Finally, he got himself removed. Looking at Roanli sitting on the ground with a dazed expression, the second prince couldn't help but stifle his laughter. The emperor glanced at him and frowned. He turned to the empress and said, "I'll ground you for 3 months. You came out today. In that case, you'll be grounded for another year." Your Majesty, you can't do this." Empress Lu finally reacted. She scrambled over and grabbed the emperor's clothes. She cried and begged, "Your Majesty, you can't just cripple Leo like this." Li was just confused for a moment. He will change. As she spoke, Empress Lu reached out and pressed the crown prince's head to kowtow. Roanli put on an act and said in a tearful voice, "Father, please have mercy. I know I was wrong. I will be a good person in the future. I won't dare to. We have made up our mind." Song Zhou's emperor kicked away his son, who was so disgusting no matter how he looked at him. He flicked his sleeves and said, "Just wait for the decree." Empress Lu collapsed to the ground with a broken heart. Looking at the emperor who left with the second prince without looking back, she couldn't help but burst into tears. It's over, it's all over. Her broken vision finally focused on the 2 delicate-looking men behind the crown prince, Roanli. She suddenly pulled out the long sword hanging on the wall and slashed at them like a maniac. "I'll kill you bitches. It's you. You're the ones who instigated my son to be bad. Your Highness the Crown Prince." The 2 handsome men sobbed and threw themselves into Roanli's arms. Roanli. Chapter 4027. Empress Lu's eyes were practically spitting out poisonous light. Holding the sword in her hand, she slashed at the 2 handsome men in a disorderly manner. The 2 men tightly clutched Roanli's lapels and sobbed, "Your Highness the Crown Prince." Roanli couldn't help but tremble all over. He hurriedly stood in front of the 2 men and shouted at the lunging Empress Lu, "Mother Empress, don't mess around. The 2 of them are my lovers. They are people I wholeheartedly want to protect. You can't kill them. Mother Empress, if you dare to touch them, your son will accompany them to the Yellow Springs." The 2 handsome men, "Great Crown Prince, aren't you fucking acting a little too much?" Empress Lu raised the sword over her head and instantly froze on the spot. She stared blankly at Roanli for a moment. Then with a wah sound, she actually spat out a mouthful of congested blood. "Roanli, I really am a talent. I actually angered the Empress to the point of spitting out blood. Your Majesty the Empress." The 2 young eunuchs shrieked and flew forward to support Her Majesty the Empress, who had fallen on her back. "Your Majesty!" The young eunuchs shrieked and looked at the unconscious Empress Lu, then glanced at the calm crown prince. Roanli waved his hand and said, "Mother's health isn't good. Hurry and send her back to the palace to recuperate." "Yes, Your Highness." The 2 handsome men stood beside Roanli and tugged at the corners of his clothes, sobbing nonstop. Roanli waved his hand at the group of trembling and pale women. "You can leave first." After something like this happened, these women naturally weren't in the mood to continue playing with the crown prince. Moreover, just now, His Majesty had said some harsh words. His Highness the Crown Prince's position was probably going to be shaky. Sob, sob, sob. Stop sobbing. After everyone left and the palace doors closed, Roanli hurriedly pulled his sleeves back from the 2 men. His entire body trembled in disgust, and he quickly took 3 steps back. The 2 sobbing men simultaneously looked up and looked at him innocently. "Your Highness the Crown Prince, your words just now." The Empress fainted from anger. "Go put on your clothes for me." Roanli glanced at the cloaks that were faintly discernible on their bodies and turned his eyes away in disdain. "Umph." A set of clean clothes quickly appeared in their hands. As they took off their wet clothes, they said softly, "How heartless. Didn't you just say that you want to live and die with us?" Roanli, "By the way, did Master say when he would be able to retire?" Roanli said expressionlessly, "You 2 acted too much just now, especially when the Empress raised her sword. You were so weak that I couldn't bear to look at you. She's from a brothel. One of the handsome men waved his sleeve unhappily. She doesn't even have the strength to truss a chicken. The Empress had raised her sword to kill. What else can we do other than hide in your arms? Wrongly, you guys are really shameless. As God realm experts, where is your face to be so bold and self-righteous? Even if you deliberately sealed your cultivation, facing the Empress's three-legged cat martial arts, can you not dodge? Wrongly raised his hand to cover his face. You guys leave. Let me be alone for a while. Humph. The two handsome men flung their sleeves and walked out in annoyance. I don't even want to talk to you. You're the one who acted too fake. I think that the Emperor has most likely seen through your true identity. Chapter 4028. Ronley shook his head exasperatedly and poured himself a cup of tea. Actually, it was normal for the Emperor to be suspicious of him. Which normal person would have such a drastic change in temperament in such a short period of time? He touched his face and chuckled absent-mindedly. But so what if the Emperor was suspicious of him? How could the Empress be able to figure out something that even the Emperor couldn't find out? She would probably be able to reel in the net very soon. Fengyang City, inside the command tent. Duan Yu propped up his forehead with one hand, and his gaze landed on his finger. There, a silver interspatial ring was faintly discernible and flickering. Shadow strode over and opened the tent flap with one hand. He bowed as he entered and presented a message talisman with both hands. Duan Yu took it and looked at it for a while before tossing it back to Shadow. He nodded and said, "Wui and the others have already taken care of it." It seemed that the insufferably arrogant Her Majesty the Empress had already tasted the bitter fruit. However, this was nothing compared to the pain he had suffered. It was far from enough. "Your Highness, when are we going back?" A black line involuntarily appeared on Shadow's forehead. They had been here for 2 to 3 days, and every day they would see that Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the Divine Prefecture Army, young General Xie, drop by their place when he had nothing to do. He would often look for His Highness to drink tea and chat. He didn't even know what he was doing here. Everyone would come and go as they pleased. Xie Tianwei, who was currently being nagged by Shadow, landed upside down from the small window outside the tent. He patted the dust off his body and grumbled, "Say, can you stop setting up traps outside all the time? I've already fallen into a trap 3 times. Can't you change it to something new?" Duan Yu remained silent as he swept a glance at that guy. Shadow's mouth twitched, and he walked out with the Jade Message Talisman. Don't think he didn't see that although His Highness was looking at that young Sir Xie with disdain, there were still 2 cups of tea on the table. Xie Tianwei casually flitted over and sat in front of Duan Yu. He scooped up a cup of tea and gulped it down like a cow drinking water. Another cup. He put down the teacup and smiled at Duan Xiaoxi. "Your Highness, when do you think we can go home?" "In 2 days." Duan Yu leisurely poured him a cup of tea. "Is it because the army doesn't have enough provisions?" "There's a bandit stronghold nearby. We can rob it together tomorrow. It can be considered as contributing to the local people," Duan Yu said nonchalantly. But Xiaolauer almost spat out the tea in his mouth. He looked speechlessly at the other person's serious face and thought to himself, "No wonder this guy can become friends with our family's highness. He really has a black heart. We don't lack provisions." He really didn't lack provisions. Before he came, the Crown Prince had given him a storage talisman in private. The provisions inside were enough to last him half a year, let alone half a month. Duan Yu seemed to have thought of something, and his icy expression also eased a bit. He nodded and said, "Jojo won't let you all starve. Tomorrow, all of you will retreat." Tenli understood. Xie Tianwei poured a cup of tea and asked with sparkling eyes, "Your Highness, the tea here is especially delicious. How about you give me some tea leaves?" "No." Duan Yu expressionlessly refused. Xie Tianwei surreptitiously reached out and tugged at Duan Yu's sleeve. Chapter 4029. Duan Yu glanced at him and muttered to himself for 2 seconds before replying, "I can only give you half a tael." Xie Tianwei stared at Duan Yu as if the sky had collapsed before complaining. "You're too stingy, Your Highness." Duan Yu nodded. "I can't be generous." He didn't have much in stock, so it was only enough for him to appreciate. There were only 200 taels of spirit tea leaves. After getting used to this, he would find other teas tasteless. If Xie Tianwei knew that his fourth prince only gave him half a tael of 200 taels of tea leaves, he would definitely slap this guy to death. He actually couldn't even give up a round number of one tael. Duan Yu took out half a tael of tea leaves and placed it in a small box before handing it to the grim-faced Xie Tianwei. He patted his shoulder. "Use it sparingly. Then are we still going to that bandit stronghold to exterminate the bandits tomorrow?" Xie Tianwei asked before leaving. Duan Yu nodded. "We have nothing to do anyway." When Xie Tianwei went out, he slipped and almost fell into the pit at the entrance again. When Ing came in with dinner, he asked exasperatedly, "What did His Highness do?" "Young Master Xie looks like he has nothing left to live for." Duan Yu picked up his chopsticks and swiped at the noodles in a bowl before bringing it to his lips to take a bite. He pondered pensively before replying, "He probably thinks I'm a bit stingy." Ing. The next day, all the courtiers in Sangzhou received news that the Divine Prefecture army had retreated 5 kilometers away. They all beamed with joy as they spoke to His Majesty, praising His Highness the Fourth Prince for his ability. Look, he had only been there for 3 days and had already reached an agreement with the Divine Prefecture army. They were already retreating. Who else would be able to handle this matter so beautifully? Sure enough, their Sangzhou's fourth prince was the most capable. At morning court that day, the left prime minister and his entourage, led by Wu Yong, all submitted memorials requesting that His Highness the Fourth Prince be the crown prince. It had only been less than 15 minutes since the emperor issued the edict to depose Crown Prince Rong Li. "Your Highness, Ming Province has sent an envoy and is requesting an audience with Your Highness outside the barracks." A young general of the Fierce Tiger Battalion reported outside the tent. At this time, Duan Yu and Xie Tianwei were discussing how to quickly and accurately deal with that group of people when they went to the bandit stronghold at night. When he heard the report, he couldn't help but be slightly stunned. Xie Tianwei glanced meaningfully at Duan Yu before quietly saying, "It looks like the visitor doesn't have good intentions." Duan Yu sent him a look, indicating for him to enter the inner room. This tent was different from other places. The outer room was used to discuss military matters. Inside, there was a slightly smaller bedroom. Soon, the underworld continent's emissary was led in. He strode in with his head held high and his chin raised. There was a rather proud expression on his face. "Greetings, Sangzhou's fourth prince." Duan Yu nodded. He didn't mind Duan Yu's abnormal arrogance and merely asked aloofly, "May I know the envoy's purpose in coming?" The Ming province envoy was evidently very dissatisfied with Duan Yu's aloof attitude. He raised his chin and declared loudly, "This envoy is acting on the orders of our Ming province's crown prince to specially come to contact His Highness Prince Chun. The crown prince of Mingzhou intends to join forces with Prince Chun to make a grand plan. Ming province can dispatch 300,000 soldiers to help His Highness Prince Chun completely take over all the territory within 50 kilometers of Fengyang City." Duan Yu curled his lips and looked quite interested. He stared at that envoy and said, "Since the crown prince of Mingzhou is in such a good mood, why didn't he come to discuss it personally?" Chapter 40-30. The envoy's face immediately darkened, and he retorted haughtily, "How is that possible? Why would His Highness the Crown Prince personally come over for such a trivial matter? Are you an idiot?" The soldiers standing on both sides of the large tent all hung their heads, concealing the sympathy in their eyes for the envoy. The grass on the grave of that veteran general who dared to act like a boss in front of His Highness last time and shout loudly was probably about 3 meters tall. Duan Yu nodded. "Since that's the case, where are the 300,000 troops? Are the provisions adequately prepared?" The envoy looked at Duan Yu like he was an idiot. "This, naturally, we have to discuss and sign the agreement before transporting the people over. You're not Ming Yasi's subordinate, right?" Duanyu looked at the envoy and asked with a grin. Let me guess. Ming Yasi shouldn't be that stupid. You're Ming Province's emperor's subordinate, right? Sir Envoy. A thin trace of anger slid across the envoy's face. Why do you care who I am? In short, what are you still standing there for? There's actually an idiot who can negotiate with this prince in this world. Duanyu waved his hand indifferently. Drag him out and behead him. Remember to keep the corpse intact and send it to Ming Province's emperor. Yes. The envoy's face instantly turned green and white. Even as he was dragged out, he still refused to give up and shouted repeatedly, You actually dare to kill me? You, Prince Chun, you. Even if the two countries are at war, you can't kill an envoy, right? Furthermore, Ming Province and Song Province weren't freaking at war. What kind of fat fourth was this? Please, can you follow the routine? Xie Tianwei chuckled as he walked out of the inner room. He glanced at Duanyu and said, Your Highness the Fourth Prince killed an envoy just like that. Aren't you worried that Ming Province's emperor will really send troops to surround you in a fit of rage? Him? Duanyu shook his head. He doesn't have the guts. Within Fengyang City, the Divine Prefecture's army was stationed with 1 million soldiers, and Song Province's army was 700,000 soldiers. If Ming Province was willing to mess things up, then come. At most, I'll beat you to death and make it a one-way trip. Xie Tianwei chuckled and waved his hand. Then see you tonight, Your Highness Prince Chun. Then he left the tent with his servant. Your Highness, this Xie Tianwei doesn't seem simple. Duanyu absent-mindedly sat back down at the table and smoothed out the Xian paper on the table. Which of the people around Immerse are simple? Why do you think he comes here all the time? He'll know the moment there's a commotion in the underworld province, Duanyu said aloofly. As soon as that emissary left the underworld region, he would definitely be targeted by Xie Heir's people. He's been waiting to see His Highness' attitude. Ing asked in surprise. Duanyu nodded expressionlessly. Immerse, that fool, trusted him, but that didn't mean that all of his confidants trusted him. So now you believe in His Highness? Ing felt that these people's minds were twisted and turned, and it was really hard to understand. Duanyu set down his brush and smiled faintly. He sighed and said, How could it be that easy? Let's wait and see. These people would eventually find out about his relationship with Immerse, so there was no hurry. Woof! The three puppies happily scuttled around Arbor's feet and followed her all the way to Changle Avenue. Today was a rare day of leisure, so she planned to go out for a stroll with her husband. Just as they reached the plaza, the three puppies suddenly started barking madly. They jumped in front of a notice board and tore at something with all their might. Chapter 4031. What are they doing? A few passers-by curiously pointed at the three puppies hanging on the signboard, whispering and pointing at them as they watched. He saw the three little fellows pulling at the notice board, tearing the paper on it, and continuously letting out low growls from their mouths. What are you doing? Arbor speechlessly walked forward and glanced at the notice board, raising her eyebrows slightly. Needless to say, the notice for the blue-eyed, three-headed dog had already spread from Jiaowei City to the imperial capital's Longyan City. What was posted on the notice board was an extremely mighty and domineering, ferocious beast drawn on it. It had three large, sinister heads, a tall and sturdy body, and four hooves that were as sharp as a snow wolf's claws, especially that pair of dark green pupils. When it looked at you faintly, it looked like it would pounce on you and bite your throat in half. It was drawn quite well. The little stoic expressionlessly glanced at the three puppies tearing the notice board and slightly knitted her brows. Prince Immerse slowly walked over. When he saw this scene, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows and whisper next to her ear, This is probably their family's ancestor. If it wasn't their ancestor, would they be in such a hurry? Arbor speechlessly glanced at this frivolous man and rolled her eyes at him. She roared at the three, Hurry up and come over. I'll take you guys to eat delicious food. Woof woof. The three puppies clawed at the notice board and whimpered softly. They abruptly turned back to look at Arbor and dashed over with a whoosh. One of them bit the hem of Chiao Mu's skirt and dragged her toward the notice board. Arbor was baffled and pointed at the wanted portrait on the notice board. You guys want to tear it down? Woof, woof, woof. The three puppies madly nodded their small heads on the side, and the surrounding passers-by couldn't help but feel a bit strange. Although these three snowball-like puppies only looked to be the length of an arm, their bodies were extremely nimble, and they seemed to be able to understand human speech. Arbor was baffled. Why would I tear it down? I didn't find the Cerberus. When she spoke up to this point, Chiao Mu suddenly paused and abruptly lowered her head to glance at those three. Woof, woof, woof. It can't be, right? Arbor narrowed his eyes and looked at the three puppies. He then raised his head and looked at the mighty and domineering painting on the signboard. Impossible. She immediately rejected her strange idea and muttered in a low voice. How could it be so coincidental? The most important thing was that the three cute puppies in front of him couldn't possibly make people associate them with the mighty and fierce beasts in the picture. Woof, woof. The three puppies tilted their heads and hopped around on the spot. It's written on the notice that they're buying a live cerulean. A passerby said in a loud voice, "You guys don't know, but the entire Jiaowei city is in chaos right now. For the sake of this 100 million spirit coins, many people are looking for this Cerberus openly and secretly. The Cerberus is really rare. Yeah, I've seen a lot of two-headed ones." Arbor glanced at the passers-by who were chatting and laughing. She stepped forward and gently kicked the three puppies. Hurry up and come here. What were they dawdling in the square for? She still wanted to stroll around after eating. Woof, woof, woof. The three puppies drooped their small heads and hopped around Arbor's legs. Arbor was annoyed by their hopping and raised her hand to pick them up. Chapter 4032. She stuffed two into the arms of the exasperated Mo Lien, while clattering ahead with one in her arms. She muttered, so baffling. Of course it was ridiculous. Could it be that she had been thinking about the blue-eyed, three-headed dog recently? So everyone looked like a three-headed dog to her? Otherwise, why would she suddenly think that these three little puppies seemed to be hinting something to her? She suddenly stopped in her tracks and turned around to walk towards the signboard. Mo Lien was startled and naturally followed her. She looked at her wife helplessly and said, "Jojo, what's wrong? What was going on? Why did his wife suddenly have a problem with the signboard?" Arbor suddenly scratched the little white puppy's fur and pointed at the three-headed dog on the signboard. "Is it your ancestor?" The little puppy in her arms immediately shook its little head vigorously. The two in Mo Lien's arms also shook their heads vigorously. The three little heads shook at the same time. The rhythm and frequency were really similar. Arbor hesitated for a moment and suddenly asked on a whim, "Is that you?" Then, the crowd saw a scene that made them not know whether to laugh or cry. The three little puppies nodded their little heads furiously and barked woof, woof, woof. The three heads nodded as if they wanted to fall off at the same time. Hey, these three little puppies nodded. What do you mean? What can they mean? They said that the three-headed dog on the signboard is the three of them. Ahaha. A few onlookers couldn't help but laugh. Then, there was a T-sound of laughter. Ahaha. Then, there was a mocking laugh from behind the signboard. Xiaomu poked her head out while hugging the cute little puppy. She saw Lin Miao, walking over from behind the signboard while pulling along an unfamiliar girl. It looked like they had just finished eating at the restaurant behind and were coming over to watch the show. Behind the two of them was an 18-year-old pretty girl. Arbor recognized her at a glance. It was the beloved disciple of He One from the Medicine King Island, Anai Hanji, whom he had met in the mountains behind the royal school. Anai Hanji also saw Arbor at a glance. Thinking of how she had carelessly added a few strokes to the revival Bodhi grass, she knew that the girl in front of her would definitely suffer a lot. She couldn't help but feel a little proud in her heart. Who asked you to disrespect the people of the island of the Medicine King? Now that she looked at Arbor, she really didn't like it. He boasted shamelessly that he could refine the soul-returning pill. But in the end, didn't he still have to rely on the Bodhi soul-returning pill's pill formula given by his master to gather all the ingredients? Others might not know who had issued the warrant for the blue-eyed Cerberus, but Hanji knew better than anyone else. Apart from Prince Imo, who was able to gather the power of the entire nation, who else would be able to afford 100 million spirit coins? She was truly a shameless seductress. She could actually make the crown prince disregard his reputation to help her. And Hanji's eyes lit up with a trace of anger. These two people dared to give her and her master the cold shoulder, so they should be prepared to die. That Prince Imo actually dared to look down on her. A little crown prince of the divine land dared to look down on the Medicine King Island. What a joke. She didn't like him. And Hanji wouldn't want a married man, even if he was given to her. The man that she and Hanji liked must be the most outstanding man in the world. Chapter 4033. Oh, what am I seeing? Lin Miao laughed so hard that tears were about to fall out. What a joke. Lin Miao pretended to wipe away the non-existent tears at the corners of her eyes. Look, Miss Chiao is talking to 3 little grass dogs. Do you really think that these 3 little dogs are ancient ferocious beasts? Ha ha ha. When Lin Miao laughed like this, the surrounding onlookers also wanted to laugh. However, they restrained themselves, especially when they saw the little stoic's expressionless face. For some reason, they felt like they couldn't continue laughing. They felt like they were laughing like idiots. The girl with icy skin and snow-white bones in front of them had a stoic face and didn't give them any response at all for a long time. Arbor raised her hand to stroke the little puppy's fur. Meanwhile, the little puppy in her arms bared its teeth at Lin Miao, and made a lunging posture. Humph! Lin Miao harumphed coldly and glanced disapprovingly at the 3 little puppies. She mocked. Miss Chiao, can't be that you really believe these 3 little mongrel dogs, right? They think that because there are 3 heads drawn on the painting, ha ha, they're the 3 of them? At this point, Lin Miao started jeering loudly and wantonly again. Ha ha, that's really too funny. They're 3-headed dogs, not 3 dogs. Buffed. The surrounding onlookers couldn't help but want to laugh again, but they glanced at the still expressionless Sir Jojo. They couldn't laugh again for some reason. Imo Yin knitted her brows and walked up to pull her wifey over. Just as she was about to speak, Arbor pulled her hand to stop her. Jojo's Lotus was simply lowering her status by talking to them. The best way was to let these women perform a one-man show on their own. She couldn't be bothered to pay attention to them. She was standing here talking to her little puppies. Why did she need these irrelevant people to express their opinions? She was simply crazy. Arbor raised her hand, and the painting that had been ripped apart by the 3 little puppies floated into her hand. Arbor scratched the puppy's head and asked again with a serious face, "Was it you?" Woof, 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 woof. The 3 puppies nodded their heads in unison, with an expression that said, "Yes, yes, yes, please praise me." Imo Yin glanced at his wife in amusement and held her little hand. Is it true? If these 3 puppies were really the Cerberus, then it would be a huge joke. Husband, don't forget to pay me 100 million spirit coins. Imo Yin, wife, my spirit coins are all yours. Arbor thought about it and agreed. He glanced at him regretfully and said, "It's rare that I want to give away a wave of wealth, but I can't." Imo Yin couldn't help but nod. That's true. What else could he say? Wasn't it all because his wife was awesome? Although these 3 little puppies were completely different from the mighty and domineering Cerberus, but he felt that these 3 puppies didn't need to lie to them. Moreover, in retrospect, the things that these 3 puppies had done were all very strange. For example, they liked to gnaw on divine beasts and holy beasts, and they didn't eat elixirs that weren't divine grade or above. He remembered that when the 3 puppies were fighting the 2-headed dragon on Mount Daizone, they tore off the scales and barbs on the holy beast's neck with one bite. After that, these 3 puppies' behavior was never normal. Chapter 4034. Other people didn't know how extraordinary these 3 puppies were, but as their master, the little girl was naturally well aware of their abilities. At this time, she met Imo Yin's eyes, and both of them saw confirmation in each other's eyes. These three puppies most likely weren't lying to them. They were probably really the ancient, vicious, three-headed dog. But Lin Myoer's ridicule seemed to have some truth to it. They had never seen a three-headed dog turn into a three-headed dog before. This was too bizarre. Arbor glanced at the puppy in her arms and patted its head. Then why didn't you say anything when we issued the arrest warrant earlier? Woof, woof. The puppy looked at its little master in bewilderment. Arbor also felt that her question was a bit funny. At that time, she and Mo Lien were discussing how to issue the arrest warrant in Jiaowei City. So these three puppies weren't with her. If it weren't for the fact that they could see arrest warrants everywhere on the streets today, these three puppies would probably still be in the dark. They were actually wanted by their master. Xiao Mu covered her small face with her hand, suddenly at a loss for words. How should she put it? This really was a huge misunderstanding. The little stoic petted the puppy's chubby body before turning around to pull Mo Lien to the side of the plaza as if no one else was around. There were many restaurants and tea houses here, so they could just pick one to eat first. Besides, there were too many people here, so it wasn't convenient for her to communicate with the puppies. Or when Lin Myoer saw that the husband and wife pair didn't pay any attention to her, she directly walked around them to leave. She instantly felt a bit angry, and she didn't know where her courage came from, but she suddenly reached out to block Arbor's path. Wait. Emolien's cold and heavy eyes swept over Lin Myoer's face. Arbor hooked her arm around her husband's arm and glanced at her with a bored expression. She said indifferently, "What? Do you want to lose a few more teeth? Or do you not want your face anymore?" Lin Myoer's face stiffened. "Do you really think your Lin family can do whatever you want in the sovereign capital?" Arbor reprimanded mercilessly. "You can try. You, Myoer." The girl on the side hastily grabbed her and curtsied. "Crown Princess, please don't be angry. Myoer is only joking with you." "What's so funny?" Arbor's voice was cold as she swept her gaze around her. "Funny?" Everyone shook their heads in unison. What was so funny about this? Now, everyone had this strange illusion that they were about to get involved in the fun. What does it have to do with you whether my three little dogs are Cerberus or not? What a bunch of weird women. What a bunch of weird women. You're lying. Lin Myoer angrily flung her companion's hand away. Gu Isin bit her lip and looked helplessly at the angry Lin Myoer. She then looked back at Miss and I Hanji from Medicine King Island, as if asking for help. Miss and I had a high status in the Lin family. As long as she was willing to say a word, Myoer probably wouldn't clash with the Crown Princess. But would an I Hanji dissuade her? She watched gleefully, wishing nothing more than to see Xiao Mu suffer a setback. Even if Lin Myoer didn't start a fight, she would still say a few words and let them fight. Moreover, now that Lin Myoer had stepped forward to pick a fight with Arbor, why would she stop her? Do you dare to compete? Chapter 4035. Compete? Arbor stared strangely at the woman in front of him. Hadn't this woman received enough of a lesson? Did she want to seek her own suffering again? The little stoic was disinterested and was about to flatly refuse this person's request. Suddenly, Lin Myoer raised her hand. Bang! After a loud noise, panicked cries came from the crowd. At the same time, everyone hurriedly retreated in a flurry. A huge black dog descended from the sky in front of Xiao Mu. Its four thick and solid paws were clawing at the ground as drool dripped from its mouth. It was currently staring fixedly at Xiao Mu with a pair of small eyes that were like ice shards. Mo Lien reflexively pulled his wife into his arms and narrowed his eyes, fury flitting through them. "You're courting death." His tone was abnormally icy, and when he stared at Lin Myoer, the latter unexpectedly shuddered. When an I Hanji saw this, she stepped forward and stood next to Lin Myoer with a grin. "What does your Highness the Crown Prince mean?" "Miss Lin merely wants to follow the Crown Princess's three-headed dogs." She sneered and disdainfully swept her gaze over the three small dogs. She continued, "It's just a competition. How is this enough to anger the Crown Princess? Could it be that you don't dare to compete? Yo, yo, yo. It's so lively." And Wu Shuang's voice came from afar. Arbor turned around, and sure enough, he saw a fiery red figure squeezing through the crowd and running over like a wisp of smoke. "Oh my, such a big dog. Who are you trying to scare here?" And Wu Shuang's gaze swept around and finally landed on Lin Muir, who had an unsightly expression. She giggled and said, "Why is it you again? What, this commandery princess didn't teach you enough last time. Now that your teeth are fixed, you're making a ruckus on the streets again?" When Lin Muir saw and Wu Shuang's unrestrained manner, she felt her teeth ache for no reason. She herself didn't realize that she had involuntarily taken 2 steps back. He stared at Wu Shuang warily and sneered, "Don't slander me." Who is causing trouble on the streets?" Lin Muir said loudly. I just came to—" She took a deep breath and looked at Arbor angrily. "How about it? Do you dare to compete with me? Didn't you say that these 3 puppies are Cerberus? Why don't we let them compete? Right and wrong, we will know once we compare them." Meower. Gu Isin tugged at her sleeve. She wanted to advise her not to cause any more trouble. However, how could Lin Meower listen to her? She flung her hand away. In addition, the troublemaker Enai Hanji chuckled. "Could it be that the crown princess is afraid of losing? Are you weak now?" Lin Muir became even more excited. Today, she was going to expose this woman's lies. Xiaomu rolled her eyes and glanced at Lin Miao, in utter boredom. The 3 puppies beside her could even bite a holy beast to death. It didn't matter if they were Cerberus or not. This was the truth. The giant black dog that Lin Muir summoned was just a spiritual beast. It wasn't even at the level of a divine beast. How could it run up to its death? It was either crazy or stupid. Where are the crown princess guards? Prince Amo couldn't help but laugh. Several figures suddenly appeared beside Arbor. Arbor pointed impatiently. "So long-winded. Throw them into the capital's prison and lock them up for 3 to 5 days. Chapter 4036. Lin Miao, Gu Isin, and even Enai Hanji, who was watching from the side, were all dumbfounded. What was going on? The shadow guards rushed forward and grabbed Lin Miao's arm. Seeing that she still wanted to resist, they slashed the back of her neck with a knife. Lin Miao lowered her head in pain and said angrily through gritted teeth, "Crown Princess, what are you trying to do?" The little Crown Princess looked like she couldn't be bothered to talk to an idiot. She waved her hand. "Take her away." 2 shadow guards immediately grabbed Lin Miao, like they were grabbing a little chick, and carried her in the direction of the capital office. Gu Isin was dumbfounded, and Ai Hanji was also a little dumbfounded. She couldn't help but raise her voice and say angrily, "What do you mean by this? She just wants to compete with you in spiritual beasts. Why are you? Take her away too." The little crown princess raised her hand impatiently. Immediately, 2 more hidden guards rushed over and grabbed the cursing Enai Hanji without saying a word. They dragged her towards the capital office. "Let me go, you impudent, impudent." Enai Hanji was so angry that her heart ached. She had never been treated like this before. What kind of crown princess was this? She was simply a crazy person. Why did she send them to the capital office's prison without saying anything? If Empress Dowager Chen was here, she would definitely want to curse out loud. This little crown princess was indeed a piece of trash. She wanted to compete with you in spiritual beasts, but you used your power to suppress her. She wanted to play harem and mind games with you, but you didn't play by the rules at all and used your strength to suppress her. How could they continue to play with you? You didn't play harem games. You didn't play with strength in Jianghu. You were the opposite of everyone. Who could continue to play with you happily? And Wu Shuang almost burst out laughing. She opened her mouth and laughed out loud. But at this moment, Lin Miao's howl came from afar. In the blink of an eye, that huge black dog that was scratching its paws on the ground suddenly flared up all its fur and pounced at Xiaomu with a whoosh. Roar! Woof, woof, woof! The 3 little white dogs' fur bristled as they leaped out. Whoosh! 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 They pounced on the large black dog like 3 bolts of lightning. One of them bit its back, the other its chest, and the last one pounced on its throat and bit it right in the face. After a few tearing sounds, the giant dog let out a miserable howl. 3 pieces of flesh were torn off by the cute little puppy, and blood immediately gushed out like a fountain. Woof! And Wu Shuang was completely stunned. She rubbed her eyes. The silent crowd suddenly burst into a burst of panic screams. Wow! Everyone rolled and crawled as they fled in all directions in a sorry state. They were scared to the point their scalps went numb. What the fuck is going on? How could these 3 little puppies, which were only the size of a palm, bite such a huge dog to death in a pool of blood? Wasn't this a little too cruel? Gu Yisin was the only one of the 3 girls who hadn't been taken away. At this moment, she was so scared that she sat down on the ground. Her legs were stained with dog blood. She was so scared that she kept retreating, her whole body trembling uncontrollably. This was too frightening, too frightening. The 3 adorable little puppies had actually been able to unleash such power all of a sudden. No one had expected this, and no one was mentally prepared. So they all went home with vomiting expressions and had nightmares. Chapter 4037. In the blue and white restaurant, the little crown princess was stroking the fur of the 3 puppies beside her, and Wu Shuang laughed with a wine glass in her hand. I think those onlookers won't be able to sleep tonight. It was too funny, thinking back to the confused, frightened, and defenseless expressions on everyone's faces. Haha, Princess Wu Shuang burst into laughter. Emol Yin looked at the bright candle in disdain and took the dishes in front of her to arbor. Don't spray. Brother, you're not giving me any face at all. Princess Wu Shuang's face immediately turned bitter. Give you no face? I'll give you face when you get married obediently. Don't come looking for your sister-in-law for no reason and affect our married life. And Wu Shuang really wanted to smash the wine glass in her hand into his face. Arbor blinked and glanced at Emol Yin beside him, then looked up at Princess Wu Shuang. Wu Shuang, why are you here? And Wu Shuang immediately dragged the stool towards Arbor. I'm here to talk to my sister-in-law. Sister-in-law, I don't know if you've heard that the people from the Medicine King Island want to hold an elixir auction in Dragonflame City. Sister-in-law, are you free? Let's go and have fun together. Your sister-in-law is not free. Emol Yin rejected her without hesitation. Third Fu will be back in the capital tomorrow. He should be free these days. You can go and find him. And Wu Shuang's head drooped as she lowered it. Arbor looked at Emol Yin in confusion. Emol Yin took his wife's hand and glared at Wu Shuang with a look of disappointment. She's just a papaya head. Jojo, help me persuade her when you're free. Brother, can we not talk about him? And Wu Shuang glared at him angrily. Arbor dragged the stool towards Wu Shuang and asked her, Lien said that you and third young Master Fu are in love with each other. Why do you have such an expression at the mention of him? The little fellow said to her with an experienced expression, You haven't seen someone you like for a long time. Don't you miss him? If Jojo's Ren leaves for a while, Jojo will miss her. And Mo Lien, what should he do if he felt that his wife was hilarious? And Wu Shuang mumbled and said sourly, Don't listen to brother's nonsense. Third young Master Fu already has a fiancée. Why should I join the fun? What? Jojo was unhappy when he heard this. I didn't expect third Fu to be such a scumbag. He actually had a wife and still came to provoke you? Then just ignore him. Emol Yin did not know whether to laugh or cry. He quickly pulled his wife to his side and tried to prove his brother's innocence in a low voice. Third Fu doesn't have a wife. Don't listen to Wu Shuang's nonsense. Third Fu has done a meritorious deed by clearing out the zombies in Li City. Let's ask father to arrange a marriage for him. Why was there so much trouble? Wu Shuang was the only one who liked to let her imagination run wild. Brother. And Wu Shuang called out in dissatisfaction. All right. Emol Yin could not be bothered with her and waved his hand. You're so long-winded. A 19-year-old girl is even more naggy than a 90-year-old woman. And Wu Shuang! Exclamation point. Brother, what did I say? From the beginning to the end, you were the only one talking and acting on your own, okay? It really made her speechless. Xiao Mu couldn't resist, smiling as the corner of her mouth turned up. Chapter 4038. After a while, Arbor took out a silver needle and tested it on the three puppies. Then, she sighed and put down the needle. It's useless to take blood now. Why? And Wu Shuang asked curiously. I think these three puppies are extraordinarily brave. They're even braver than the tigers and wolves in my army. Wu Shuang built a tiger and wolf battalion. Mo Yin put the peeled shrimp on the small plate in front of Arbor and said with a smile, Jojo, is there any way to strengthen the bodies of tigers and wolves? Those should be low-level, spiritual beasts. Arbor tilted her head. There is. She took out a few bottles of medicinal liquid from her inner world and put them in front of Wu Shuang. These were the medicinal liquid of the breakthrough pills that she had made. It should be effective for both human and beast bodies. She remembered that her master had left many advancement pills in the longevity hall. She guessed that these would be useful. She would send a few bottles to Princess Wu Shuang later. Dilute these medicinal liquid before giving it to them. Just add a little to their food every day. And Wu Shuang nodded and took the bottles happily. Sister-in-law, I've heard that your alchemy skills are superb. I didn't expect that you'd also have experience in improving beasts. The medicinal pills that ordinary alchemists made were naturally targeted at human cultivators. Arbor had so many beasts around her, so she was different. When she was free, she would think about how to make some pills to improve her beasts. After a long time, she naturally gained a lot of experience. Mo Yin poked a cute little puppy in the next episode and shook his head in exasperation. It seems that my previous conjecture wasn't wrong. After the Cerberus escaped from the Tower of Punishment, it asked for your protection. Mo Yin had a funny expression. Speaking of which, these three puppies had good taste. If they followed Jojo, even if the Heavenly Tao wanted to attack them, it would have to consider whether it could defeat Jojo, first wolf. One of the puppies flipped its body over and revealed a heroic expression. You can poke Master Silver. Ada is not afraid of pain. Arbor couldn't help but twitch his mouth. He rubbed its fur and shook his head. If you can't regain your status as a holy beast, it's useless even if you take the blood. The Cerberus should have been heavily injured by the Heavenly Tao when it escaped from the Tower of Punishment. Emolian pondered for a moment before saying, Jojo, think about it. Before this, it had always wanted to eat the two-headed Jiao's sacred beast crystal core. Later on, it didn't even want to let go of the sacred beast lion's egg. Xiaomu nodded. She also remembered how these three little fellows had disdainfully eaten the spirit beast raging flame, Hound's crystal core. Their reluctant attitude made it seem like the spirit beast crystal core was neglecting them. They were overjoyed when they saw the Phoenix Spring, and they even wanted to eat the poisonous Flower King, a saint-ranked poisonous creature. Everything shows that they are trying their best to recover their strength. Mo Yin sighed softly. Poor Cerberus. It was a holy beast, but what kind of dog had it been beaten into by the Heavenly Tao? Why couldn't it even speak human language? Lord Jojo rubbed the three puppies' heads sympathetically and said softly but firmly, Master Silver will refine restoration pills for you to help you recover your strength. Now, they had to find a holy beast, kill it, and peel off its crystal core for them to consume. This was something that could only be chanced upon and not sought. As for pills, compared to Jojo, it was much simpler. Woof. Chapter 4039. The three puppies felt a sense of bliss that they had never felt before. Masta finally understood them completely. Masta, you're finally enlightened. Oh, well, it's not that we want to snatch delicious food. It's that we really want to recover our strength. We really want to give Masta a kiss. However, looking at the great crown prince, who was sitting on the side and glancing at them out of the corner of his eye from time to time, the three puppies very conscientiously didn't act rashly. Who the hell knew what would happen to them if they kissed Masta? Sir Jojo had a solemn and earnest expression as he patted the three puppies' heads. It's been hard on you. Don't worry. With me here, you'll definitely recover as good as new. Moreover, Heavenly Law can forget about finding trouble with you in the future. Woof. Masta is mighty, and Wu Shuang. She suddenly felt that her sister-in-law was so awesome. How did Heavenly Law get involved? Downstairs, after the large dog's corpse was cleaned up by the city guards, the pedestrians on the streets gradually started to move more densely. After the trio finished eating, they left the room and walked downstairs. Arbor suddenly turned around and tugged at her husband's sleeve. She pointed at a stall opposite the door. "Husband, there's someone selling white sugar cakes over there. I want to eat them." Emolian looked in the direction. She pointed and nodded. "Wait for me in the carriage first. I'll buy them and bring them over." Arbor nodded. Seeing that the white sugar cake stall was doing well and that there were several people lining up in front of the stall, she thought that the taste should be pretty good, so she could buy a few more pieces and leave them for the snack vendor later. Emolian left with quick steps with a smile. When Arbor turned around, she saw Princess Wushuang clutching her chest with a pitiful expression that said, "Why are you abusing dogs?" The little stoic lifted her hand to rub Wushuang's head and said earnestly, "Younger sister, after you get married in the future, you'll also be as good as us when you meet a considerate husband." And Wushuang's feet almost slipped, and her head almost hit the door frame. Damn, her sister-in-law was younger than her by 3 years. Looking at her senior-like expression, it really didn't match her stoic face. The eldest sister-in-law was like a mother. The eldest sister-in-law was like a mother. The eldest sister-in-law was like a mother. Princess Wushuang repeated it 3 times in her heart and adjusted her expression. The two of them chatted as they walked out. As soon as they reached the door, they came face to face with a woman who was surrounded by a myriad of stars. That young lady was protected by 3 maidservants. When she caught sight of Princess Wushuang and the little stoic, she was slightly taken aback. Then, she hurriedly curtsied and said, "Princess Wushuang." That woman's gaze paused on Wushuang's face for several seconds before landing on the little stoic and giving her 2 probing glances. Arbor naturally didn't recognize the woman who was secretly sizing him up. After all, ever since she came to the Divine Prefecture, she had been quite busy. She had been running between the academy and the capital, and sometimes she would go out to train for long periods of time. She was not in the capital, other than occasionally attending palace banquets and meeting the madams of the families of third-rank high officials and above, as well as the womenfolk of some extremely famous patrician families in the imperial capital. She wasn't familiar with the rest. When Wushuang saw that young lady, her expression didn't have much of a reaction. She merely swept her calm gaze over her and nodded at her. "Miss Bao, it doesn't need to be so courteous." After saying this, she took the little crown princess hand and brushed past that young lady, looking like she didn't want to say anything more. "Princess, please wait. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.